The story begins with Jasmine waking up in the same bed with a man she never expected to see. The flower of society, Jasmine Giovanni, was unrequitedly in love with one man, Richard Aion, for 7 years. He was the sword of the empire and the heir of the Duke of Aion, and this man was also the first love of many girls. Jasmine's peers generally adored him, but the only one who liked him was Jasmine. Even despite his impartial composure, which was always with him, never stopped her. The girl always thought that, despite this, she still liked him, but she understood that they would not be together. Richard always stated, no matter what they told him, he did not intend to get married now, because he had more important things to do. As a result, Jasmine was rejected even before she admitted her feelings, which is why she suffered for a long time. Richard told her that if they went any further, she might regret it, so they could stop now. However, the girl was serious, and therefore invited him to sleep with her, and she would forget about what happened. After that night, Jasmine thought she was completely crazy, because an adult noblewoman managed to get herself into such a situation. Her eyes were rolling back in her head because she was drunk, and this insensitive man didn't even think about stopping. Suddenly, Richard snuck up on her, pinning her against the door, not allowing her to leave, asking where she was going. A little earlier, the man recalled how the girl said that she loved him, asking if it was a lie. That time, Jasmine turned her head dissatisfied, denying her words, and saying that she could not say such nonsense. But deep down, she knew that she wanted to own not only the body, but also the feelings, having acquired it completely. Before he lay with her, Richard said that she was so selfish because she still needed proof. And when Jasmine woke up in the same bed with him, she thought in horror how this happened, remembering the evening. Although he looked quite normal, she had too much to drink, which is why she had the courage to offer it to him. Before all these events, Jasmine stood in front of the mirror, asking her personal maid what the problem was. After all, she has golden hair, fair skin, a pretty face. Altogether, she turns out to be the beauty of the empire. And not just a beauty. This sweet face has received recognition from many men even in this cold society. Then the girl suggested that she had no charm, but the maid tried to convince her otherwise with a smile. However, Jasmine did not back down, wondering if she had a terrible temper, but the maid tried to calm her mistress down. After all, she is the daughter of the venerable Duke Giovanni, and also has a very good reputation in social circles. The maid said that in their state they could not find brides like her, but the girl only sighed heavily. Lowering her head, Jasmine sadly asked what was the use of this, since the 7th year of her unrequited love had already begun. 16-year-old Jasmine Giovanni fell in love at first sight when one day she decided to attend a banquet. That time, at the debutante ball, she first saw the Duke of Iona, who did not smile despite the celebration. Other girls looked at him with delight, wanting to spend some time with him or go on a date. However, only Jasmine really liked him, even despite his aloofness and composure. During the tea party, the girl said that Duke Aion is so cold, although well-mannered and cool, he is too boring. Another replied that he was very handsome, and she would be nervous every day even if she was in a relationship with him. Another friend of Jasmine, with a smile on her face, said that one can only admire and dream about the Duke. After all, they all had to hear that he openly stated that he had no plans to get married in the near future. It was clear that he was a real narcissist, but she liked him, despite people's conversations and intentions. Another day, Jasmine turned to Marie, saying that she was still trying her best, and she confirmed her words. A brave girl who wanted to become a better person, went in for sports, and even learned to play the piano. The Duke and his wife were then happy to know that their daughter was doing everything to become better in the eyes of society. The maid asked why the Duke of Aion rejected such an ideal woman, but Jasmine did not know what to answer her. Perhaps the reason for this is the cancerous proposal already from the Archduke, whose response came immediately. The letter to Aion said that their meeting with his daughter would undoubtedly be a significant event for both families. But the response, in addition to words of gratitude, said that Richard was not yet ready to enter into a serious relationship. This refusal, like the edge of a knife, greatly angered the Archduke, who was indignant about this for a long time. There was still some turmoil then, but after that day, Marie was the only one who encouraged the lady in this house. The maid replied that she would always be on her side, to which she heard that Jasmine was going to confess to him again. Of course, this man is well aware of her feelings for him, but she has never talked to him about it in person. She was probably afraid that if she received a direct refusal, she would have to admit that it was time to stop. And if this time she is rejected, then she will definitely put her thoughts in order. These words surprised Marie. The excited maid immediately stated that she would support any of her choices. Jasmine knew this, so she smiled. Turning around, the girl asked the maid how she looked today. She answered with surprise that she was incredible. These words instilled confidence in Jasmine, and now she was confident that she could cope with any difficulty. When she came to his estate, full of determination, but before she even had time to confess, she was immediately rejected. Jasmine overheard Richard's childhood friend asking him the real reason he turned her down. But such numbers don't work with her, so she decided to ask directly whether he was still in love with Lily. The guy didn't answer, looking away to the side, seriously thinking about his best friend's question. Jasmine, who had been eavesdropping on them, asked in shock who Lily was and whether Richard was really in love with her. Richard's friend said with a friendly smile that she understood perfectly well how he felt about Lily. However, if something is not meant to be, he needs to pull himself together, because there are so many good girls circling around him. The guy asked her to shut up, but she did not let up. Hoping that he would quickly forget the love that had passed, he would put pressure on Lily with his behavior if he continued in the same spirit. Richard knew this, so he asked her to shut up. Jasmine was surprised, because it was the first time she had seen the Duke throw such rude words at someone. The girl decided that she and the princess were very close, so they could take some liberties in this regard. But next to her, he was always icy, although he could have at least shown her the other, living side of himself. Richard continued to be pressed, asking if he was annoyed by the fact that this was true, and no one would tell him this. Scratching his head, the guy said that she was not entirely right, which caused a surprised look in his direction. The stunned girl asked if a heartless guy like him had any other friends besides her. Richard replied that Crown Prince Gillian asked him about his engagement to the Archduke's daughter. It would be nice if, as Duke of Aion, he acquired strong and close ties with the Archduke. However, the guy said that he refused, because he was not confident enough that he was ready to start a family. With a malicious smile, the friend decided to ask if he is attracted to this girl, although he does not show it. Jasmine listened carefully, hoping to hear what Richard was hiding behind his mask of equanimity. But the guy shook his head, asking who he was to evaluate her, because she was an outstanding noble lady. Jasmine thought that this person really wasn't the least bit interested in her, which made her feel sad. The girl in the red uniform said that she had a bad character and a sweet face, and people replace people. Richard replied that he knew about it, but the main problem was that nothing good would come of it. He then added that she was a flower that belonged in a beautiful garden, but not next to a person like him. This can be understood only by looking at Giovanni's biography and the love that reigned in their family, which is rare. Turning his gaze to the window, the guy concluded that he was not a match for her, no matter how much he wanted to, and no matter how much he thought about it. Jasmine, hearing his every word, could not believe that the one for whom she was becoming better had rejected her. Richard's friend grinned, realizing that there was no point in continuing the conversation further, so she decided to leave him. Before she could say goodbye, she turned around abruptly, asking if he knew that Lily was getting married soon. Without looking up from the window, the guy answered in the affirmative, adding that this would definitely need to be noted. The girl did not understand whether this was said seriously, but he did not give an unambiguous answer, which means he himself did not know. When the door closed behind the guy, he grabbed his head, saying that unrequited love is very painful. But he didn't even realize that a couple of meters away from him stood the same girl who thought exactly the same thing. After a while, her brother and the maid stood in front of Jasmine's chambers, asking if she would come out to them again today. The guy with a smile on his face decided to joke and said that he would soon forget what his sister looked like. He then turned to the maid, asking if she had been acting like this since she went to confess to this idiot. Having received an affirmative answer, the guy clarified that he had rejected her, and the concerned maid confirmed this too. James shouted that no matter what, you can't lock yourself in four walls. The maid supported him. Suddenly, the guy decided that she urgently needed to cheer up, asking her to prepare Jasmine for a walk. With enthusiasm in her eyes, the maid agreed to do whatever it took to give her mistress some relief. She continued to try to reach Jasmine, but she, in turn, irritably asked to leave her alone. The girl mentally asked if it was not clear that she was healing the wounds of unhappy and unrequited love. However, the maid did not give up and practically demanded the mistress to open the doors for her, trying to be friendly. Suddenly, after a couple of seconds, the doors opened and Jasmine asked why she kept getting on her nerves. The maid, concerned, replied that she had not left her room for several days and had not even touched food. Explaining that things wouldn't work that way, the maid grabbed the mistress by the shoulders, inviting her to get ready for a walk. When asked what kind of walk they were talking about, Marie replied that James said he wanted to please her a little. A couple of hours later, her brother asked to say hello to his younger friend at the academy, Duke Richard. The girl looked at the guest in shock, unable to say a word, while James introduced his sister to him. The guy didn't even know about their true relationship, so he politely asked to greet each other. Taking her hand, Richard greeted Lady Leavanny, adding that they had not seen each other for a long time and that she was beautiful. Jasmine was surprised by the encounter, and a look of confusion appeared on her face as he politely kissed her hand. If you think about it like that, he's not even interested in her, but he still showers her with such compliments. Smiling, Jasmine thanked him, trying not to show what she really felt deep down. She then said that this was their first meeting since the celebration that was held at the end of the year before last. The guy agreed with an indifferent look, remembering that then they even danced together and had a nice conversation. James joined the dialogue, saying that he also remembered their dance. It was as if copied from a picture by a great artist. When suddenly he said that they were just an ideal couple, the sister looked in surprise at his naive face. But the guy continued to talk about them as if nothing had happened, while Jasmine tried to understand why he was behaving this way. Some time later, they sat at the table, drinking tea, James and Richard chatting about everything and nothing. During their dialogue, Jasmine kept her eyes on her brother, trying to understand the motives of his actions and words. If she were her brother, she would seriously think that she was not going to give up, even after being rejected. It was hard not to notice that she was in love with the Duke, but now it was time to stop, because it would not change anything. The girl noticed that he didn't even look at her, and every time he tried to look away somewhere to the side. But the worst thing was that he loved another woman, and she had no right to interfere with their relationship. Suddenly, James stood up and said that he would go and fetch the adjutant and bring the missing documents. He asked Richard to take care of his little sister, to which he agreed, and a slight smile flashed on his face. Jasmine whispered to her brother to stay, asking where he was going and leaving her alone with him. Giving her a thumbs up, James mentally asked his sister to cheer up while he was away. The girl mentally asked him to understand the hints because she was going to end this unrequited love. Despite requests not to leave her here alone, James still left, after which there was an awkward silence. With her head down, the excited girl tried to figure out what to do now and where to start the conversation. While she was thinking about this, Richard decided to address her first, saying that he wanted to tell her something. At first, Jasmine was confused, but in a second, she collected her thoughts, tucking a curl behind her ear, ready to listen. The guy said he couldn't beat around the bush, especially when it came to such serious things. With a straight face and carefully chosen words, he said that he was not good enough for her. It seemed to her that she already knew what he wanted to say, looking at his hands folded, as if in alarm. Through a sweet smile, Jasmine mentally asked him to stop and shut up, because she didn't want to hear it. However, Richard continued, saying that what he wanted to tell her was about marriage between families. Although he had already written about this in a letter, he decided that it would be much more polite to tell her this straight to her face. The girl understood that these were just polite manners, but now they were of no use. It would be hard for her to hear these words. She remembered how one of her friends said that he looked like a sweetheart, but in reality, he was boring and rude. Another agreed, adding that he is very private and so tactless that he says things he shouldn't. Jasmine immediately jumped up, trying to calm her friends down, asking what they thought was wrong with the Duke. She tried to convey that he was only a well-bred man. Moreover, he was many times better than many rude people. She was told that this was true, but she must understand that more than one woman shed tears because of his attitude. Interrupting Richard's speech, Jasmine said that he was very polite. The guy was surprised to hear such words. It would be better if he just ignored it as usual and didn't have to state the fact again. He wanted to answer her something, but the girl interrupted him again and added that from now on she would not bother him. Trying her best to smile, Jasmine said that she didn't think he hated her so much. She didn't even imagine that she had behaved so tactlessly towards him without noticing it herself. When she sent a marriage proposal, "I don't know him, it's true," he was upset then and refused in a rude manner. But she still didn't lose hope until she saw him nervously sipping his tea. She didn't even know that he hated her. Jumping up from his seat, Richard apologized and shouted loudly that he had no intention of hurting her feelings. She asked him to stop, adding that from now on she would not disturb him. She then excused herself, deciding to get as far away as possible before he noticed the tears slowly running down her cheeks. Richard wanted to stop her, but immediately froze, deciding that such an act could only make the situation worse. Jasmine was a truly happy girl who had delicious treats and romance novels. Being surrounded by a friendly and loving family, Jasmine was most interested in what snacks were waiting for her tomorrow. It was her wonderful and carefree life, in which there was no place for sadness and sorrow for unrequited love. But after their meeting, the girl, being in her chambers, shouted loudly that it was all Richard's fault. After all, it was after their meeting that everything turned upside down, and her life will never return to its previous course. Crying into her pillow, she thought that it would be good if he were not interested in that girl. Bursting with tears, Jasmine thought that she also didn't want to love him anymore. But this feeling was not easy to suppress. The next day, drinking tea in the company of her brother, the girl sighed heavily, irritating James a little. Unable to bear it, the guy asked if she needed anything, but the girl, hugging the teddy bear, replied that it was nothing. Looking at his sister's condition, James clenched his fist tightly, thinking that Richard Aion was to blame for all this. Although he was a combination of mastery of both a pen and a sword, with pleasant appearance, he still offended Jasmine. Even in comparison with him, the captain of the state knightly order, he is impeccable, but not in everything. After all, he is the perfect match for his sister. But now she is in a terrible state because of him. James shouted that that's what he thought, and he had the feeling that girls don't understand guys at all. Then he decided to find out what was wrong with their Jasmine, but the girl tucked her knees under her without answering. The guy tried to cheer her up, saying that she was the only beauty they had. Although now, however, she was a little out of sorts. No matter her appearance, her character is much more important, because she is such a kind, sweet, and sensitive girl. In a dissatisfied and resigned voice, Jasmine asked if he was joking, after which she asked him to tell it like it is. James thought she was angry, even though she had been acting demure and calm for the past few years because of the Duke. But before she was a very active and restless child, doing various pranks for fun. Suddenly, the girl turned to her brother, which made him flinch, listening carefully to what his sister would say to him. She said he was right, clutching her teddy bear at the same time, adding that Richard Aion was a scoundrel. Sharply looking at James with a menacing look, Jasmine suddenly announced that she wanted to meet a man. A few days later, they decided to attend a masquerade ball, where the girl decided to find a companion. Having dressed up, she and James walked around the hall, while he asked her if this was a deliberate decision. The girl replied that the masquerade ball is an anonymous event, so you can easily meet someone here. It's been so long since she's been to an event like this that it's awkward, but it does evoke a hint of nostalgia. At that same second, a friend named Nikki approached her, with a smile on her face, immediately recognizing Jasmine under the mask. The girl didn't expect to see her here, which made her feel awkward, and then asked what she was doing here. Nikki replied that she reads her thoughts, and Jasmine is here because her beloved Duke of Aion came here. In response to this, the girl saw her friend's irritated look, and James was afraid that his sister would lose her temper. Jasmine replied that she no longer had feelings for him. Her brother added that Nikki should be more careful with her words. But the blue-eyed girl immediately switched to James, who politely greeted his sister's friend, after which they began to exchange compliments among themselves, while Jasmine stood between them. When she got tired of listening to this, she looked at Nikki with a menacing look, hinting to her that it was time to stop. She suggested that Jasmine had to come here to meet someone new, to take her mind off Richard. Nikki whispered that she should have come alone, because no one takes their brother with them to a dating place. Suddenly, she announced that she would take care of Mr. Karras, and she could go and experience all the delights of the night festivities. Jasmine did not have time to fully understand the essence of her friend's words, which is why she tried to stop them, but to no avail. At that second, a man in a black mask was watching the girl, slowly sipping champagne and not taking his eyes off her. Jasmine thought that it was unlikely that they did this for her sake, but she would still act as she was told. She decided to do everything if it would help her forget the Duke, so she needed to relax and have a pleasant evening. After wandering around the hall alone for a while and drinking wine, the blushing girl thought that now she could live. Noticing James and Nikki, Jasmine thought it was good that no one would disturb her while she was drinking. But at that very second, her brother drew attention to her, hinting with a stern look that she should drink in moderation. Turning away, she thought that this infuriated her, because she was already an adult, and she herself knew how much to drink. Then she noticed Richard dancing with some lady. I don't know how she must feel. Going out onto the balcony and leaning on the railing, the girl bowed her head, saying that she felt absolutely rotten. Raising her head, she sighed, deciding that she had drunk too much and needed to breathe a little. Suddenly, she heard a man's voice. Turning around, Jasmine noticed a guy who asked if she was okay. When asked who he was, the guy answered ambiguously that he was a man who was fascinated by a beautiful butterfly. With a surprised and dismissive expression on her face, the girl replied that she was not interested in him and asked him to leave. The guy did not back down, noticing that she was drunk, which is why he asked permission to accompany her, but she refused. As soon as Jasmine said that she could take care of herself, at that very second she tripped, dropping her glass. She noticed too late that she would not have time to catch the vessel, which would put herself in a bad light. Lowering her head, she noticed a broken glass and the hem of her dress, on which wine stains were clearly visible. The stranger wanted to help her, extending his hand, but she threw it away and declared that there was no need for this. Looking at him with a pleading look, Jasmine asked the stranger to just leave and not disturb her. However, this only provoked the guy more, who said that he still came here to have fun. Then he suddenly rushed forward, grabbing Jasmine by the shoulder, and simultaneously said that she looked very cute. When suddenly another man grabbed his hand, calmly declaring that he had an appointment with this girl. A few minutes later, Jasmine said that everything was fine, asking her to stop following her, but was refused. Richard said that she was drunk, so he would personally escort her to the carriage so that nothing else would happen. Smiling slightly, the girl asked that apparently he was free today, calling him a handsome duke. Turning around, Jasmine said that at first he hated her to death, and then offered to accompany her to the carriage. Richard did not expect that the girl would remind him of this now, which is why he was confused, not knowing what to say. He wanted to say that there was a misunderstanding, but Jasmine decided to talk since the conversation had already started. In her entire life, this is the first time she has encountered such treatment from a man she likes. She didn't know how much he hated her, so she asked why she put so much pressure on him. After all, when Jasmine is next to him, she feels the most pathetic and helpless in the world. Well, for some reason, of course, he doesn't care. The flower hurts so much when she was offended, but tramples him with her feet. And he doesn't even imagine how much the flower loves him, and cannot respond to this love in any way. After crying, the girl added that he did not know what suffering the flower suffered because of his attitude. Richard calmly lowered his head, answering that he knew that, and then apologized to her. Covering her face with her hands, Jasmine sobbed, saying that it would be better if he were an immoral person. Suddenly, she felt dizzy, and the guy who noticed this began to ask if she was okay. Jasmine felt her head begin to spin, and she didn't notice how she leaned on Richard. He did not expect such a turn of events, and now he looked at the girl who had fallen to his chest. 7 years ago, at the Imperial Academy, Jasmine was walking down the street, unable to sleep due to her nerves. Hugging herself with one arm, the girl thought that tomorrow she and Mr. Richard would become a little closer. She remembered using James as an excuse to visit him. She suddenly had the idea of asking him to stay for a second year, but that would be too cruel. When suddenly she heard a rustling not far from her, she turned around and asked herself who was walking here at such a time. Hiding behind a tree, the worried girl thought that robbers had entered the territory. She noticed two guys standing by the fence, shouting to someone that there was no one here and they could climb over. At that same second, their third comrade, who turned out to be Richard Aion, climbed over the fence. Jasmine was dumbfounded and never expected to see her lover at night near the academy. As he jumped off, the guy asked if they wanted rumors to spread that someone had climbed over the wall. His friend apologized, after which he heard the question of what they were going to drink if they had to go all the way here. His friend was in no hurry to answer the question, taking out a cigarette and saying that if they were caught, they would deduct points. Handing the cigarettes to Richard, he added that it was not they who were risking their lives, but he, the Duke's son. Unlike them, who were expelled, he, the future Archduke, came here to study, setting an example for others. Richard replied that if he was going to talk nonsense, he should give it up, after which he reached for a cigarette. The friend said that it sounded very rude, but he helped the guy light a cigarette by bringing the match closer. Jasmine was shocked to think that academy students were not allowed to smoke, and besides, he said that he had been drinking. Meanwhile, friends asked how things were going with that widow Rich, but another asked how about Joanna. Richard responded in an irritated manner that it was not what they thought, and they were not on that kind of terms with them. His friends were surprised, saying that they had so much hope, receiving a reproachful look in response. One of his comrades asked why Richard looked so dark, because such a look makes him scared. Throw away the cigarette. The guy replied that he doesn't do anything for which he cannot take responsibility. One of the guys asked if what he does with them every night while he's here isn't responsible. When asked if this was the act of a scumbag, Richard replied that if no one found out, then no one would get hurt. With a sly smile on his face, he added that, "You just need to not get caught, and then everything will be fine." Jasmine was surprised by his last phrase that day, completely unable to believe that it was her lover who said it. When the girl tried to open her eyes, she heard Richard asking him to prepare a carriage for his mistress. She felt a sharp headache, causing her to close her eyes again, trying to come to her senses again. Richard, who was holding her in his arms, asked worriedly if she had woken up, but the girl did not answer. Someone told the guy that the carriage was already on its way. At that very second, Jasmine embarrassedly declared that he was a scoundrel. He asked the girl what she meant, but she only repeated what she had said, covering her face with her hands. Then Jasmine asked to leave her and leave, because this help was enough. But Richard refused. She is the younger sister of his friend, and he cannot leave her to the mercy of fate in this condition. And for his part, he will try to avoid random meetings with her as much as possible so as not to cause discomfort. Still intoxicated, the girl said that he was a scumbag and then asked him to let her go. Richard asked if she had always had such a character, to which he received another request to put her on the ground. Putting her down, the guy said that she was far from being the flower of society because she looked more like a toadstool. Jasmine replied that he was pretending to care about her, when in reality he didn't care. She added that she knew his creepy obsession with politeness was just an act, because his image of the perfect gentleman cannot be undermined, and he must hide behind a mask. Richard smiled spontaneously, asking if she meant that being polite was bad for others. Giving him the same smile, the girl concluded that now his true face was in front of her. Returning his indifferent expression, Richard replied that he was not stupid enough to be nice to rude people. The girl replied that old habits were making themselves felt, and she knew that he used to like to have fun. The guy didn't fully understand what she meant, because he didn't know that Jasmine was watching them that time. He had been a scumbag for about a year. She remembered this after looking at his smiling expression. With a malicious smile, the girl quoted him, saying that if no one finds out, then no one will get hurt. Memories immediately came flooding back to Richard, whose eyes widened in surprise as he looked at Jasmine. After the incident with Richard's trick, James asked where Jasmine was going in such a way for the night. Visibly nervous, the girl replied that she was going for a walk. "Thank you for Richard's success at the academy." Taking off his cloak, the guy replied that he was impeccable. His scores were excellent, and he was dressed to the nines. He will speak at the upcoming graduation ceremony as a student representative. The brother mentioned that he also gave a speech last year, but Jasmine replied that she didn't ask. Having given her a slap on the forehead, James said that if she didn't want to nod off at the presentation, she should go to bed. With a smile on his face, he wished her good night. I hope his sister doesn't do something strange. The next day, Jasmine's thoughts at the graduation ceremony were occupied with Richard. He gave a speech, and on behalf of the students, I would like to congratulate the senior comrades and teachers, and also all those who decided to devote themselves to a bright future and empire, after which he finished his speech. Jasmine thought that if studying is too hard for a student, he can allow himself to relax. She didn't know if people could be perfect, but she was aware of what that perfect person was hiding. At the time, she thought this because she was in love with him, but now things have taken a different turn. Jasmine said she has no idea about the others, but at least she knows about it. Pointing her finger at the guy, the girl gloatingly declared that she knew that he was far from ideal, as he wanted to seem. Looking at Richard's surprised face, she hoped that he would get angry and tell her what he was thinking. However, everything did not go according to plan, and now she looked surprised, looking at Richard with a blank expression. He covered his face with his palm and then burst into laughter, which made Jasmine freeze in confusion. The girl didn't understand why he was laughing, at first deciding that he was so annoyed that he was going crazy. Suddenly, a carriage drove up to them, and the coachman said that they had prepared it for the lady, as the master had asked. Standing behind the girl, Richard said that it was time for her to return home, because it was already too late. He was laughing like crazy now, and in an instant he assumed a serious expression on his face, as if nothing had happened. Jasmine watched him carefully, but now there was not a hint of a smile on his face. She said that she was on her way, so she asked to let go of her hand. Someone replied that he wanted to accompany her to the carriage. Jasmine tried to understand why he wasn't angry, because he should have at least asked her not to spread rumors. It was also surprising that he was not interested in how she knew this. At that very second, Richard turned to her. The girl realized that he was still curious, but she could easily explain everything and get out of the situation. But, contrary to her thoughts, Richard calmly declared that from now on, it would be nice if she drank in moderation. He then added that she could get into trouble while unconscious. Coming a little closer, Richard whispered that then her honor would be at risk, and she did not need that. Turning around, the guy said that it was time for him to return, after which he wished the girl a good evening. Finally, he gave her a slight grin, leaving the surprised girl standing alone near the carriage. Suddenly, she shook with indignation, after which she loudly screamed that Richard Aion was a vile bastard. On the way home, Jasmine recalled that they had bumped into each other the night before the graduation ceremony. 1 year apart, in the same place, at the same time, she hid again, watching the three guys. For Jasmine, this was a fatal coincidence, because she did not expect to hear what Richard would say. The guy calmly announced that he was going to war. His comrades replied that he had health problems. Richard explained that an armed conflict with Descartes suddenly began 3 days ago, and there would be an announcement tomorrow. Then he added that it was time to stop being willful, and therefore they should go back. That smiling expression looked strangely lonely and gloomy. She returned to the room and began to cry. After graduating from the academy, Richard performed any job perfectly and distinguished himself not only on the battlefield, but even after returning from the war as a hero, he was able to receive many awards for his efforts for the sake of the empire. She loved watching him develop and become a better person, rising in the eyes of other people. Then Jasmine firmly decided that she wanted the same thing, and perhaps next to him, she could also become a better person. But then, lying in her bed, she no longer cared about love and other nonsense that she was thinking about. 3 days after the masquerade ball, Richard and his girlfriend went hunting, tracking down deer. A deafening shot was heard, but the bullet flew past the animal, which is why it got scared and ran away. However, she was not upset, and said with a smile that the mood was still wonderful, most likely due to the weather. However, the guy could not answer in kind, sadly lowering his head, crossing his arms over his chest, barely audibly agreeing. The girl frowned, calling out to her friend, and then asked if he would continue to be sour. Handing over the weapon to the servant, she stated that even she would now fall into depression, looking at his appearance. Approaching Richard, she displeasedly asked why he was so lost, asking him to tell him everything. At first, the girl assumed that he had a hangover, because yesterday she left earlier, and he could drink without her knowledge. Hearing a negative answer, she did not back down, deciding to find out the true reason for what happened yesterday. Continuing to try to get the guy to talk, he covered his mouth with his palm, not knowing how to answer her correctly. Hearing a heavy sigh, the girl decided that something bad had really happened to Richard yesterday. Suddenly, her eyes widened in surprise when she saw that the guy took a cigarette out of his pocket. Raising her tone, Neza asked why he smokes. Because he gave up this habit when the war ended. Pointing her finger at him, she asked if he had problems, asking him to tell it like it is, without hiding anything. After taking a long drag, Richard asked if he was really so arrogant, thereby silencing the girl. After a couple of seconds, she smiled nervously, answering that, to be honest, everything is as he says. Why did the girl ask if he thought a guy like Richard would be even the least bit friendly? Sitting down on the grass next to the guy, she added that he himself knows that this is true, and now she is fed up with it. However, Neza became very interested in why he decided to ask her such a question out of the blue. At that second, a vivid image of Jasmine, who had her back turned to him, flashed through Richard's head. Then he replied that yesterday he had a fight with someone. Closing his eyes, his friend asked who he had a fight with. When she heard the name Jasmine Leovani, her eyes immediately widened and her face was filled with silent surprise. She looked at her friend in shock, loudly asking why they had a fight and how it happened. Without answering verbosely, Richard said that somehow everything worked out on its own, and he himself did not fully understand. Neza noticed that he had been talking about her often lately. The guy replied that he had mentioned her only twice. The girl clarified that as much as 2 times. This is already a lot. It even looks like a record, if you don't count the conversations about Lily. And judging by his behavior, she can assume that Richard managed to quarrel with her very strongly. Naiza then stated that she could find out everything, even if he remained silent, although now he looked worried. Shaking off the ashes, Richard replied with a barely noticeable smile that one way or another, she hit the bull's eye. After all, he cannot understand how many feelings and emotions it takes to hate a person with whom he is unrequitedly in love. Neza asked what she said to make him have such thoughts, and these words were sharper than they seemed. The guy replied that the toadstool suited her much more than the flower, to which he heard the question whether this was cruel. But, in other words, it hurt him very much. If he doesn't want to accept it, then he should just ignore it. She wasn't the first person to harbor such hatred towards him, so he had to get used to it. At that same second, Jasmine's words flashed through the guy's head when she said that she knew a lot about him. He then said that she was the first person who could convince him that he could not always be right. At the same time, while in her mansion, Jasmine loudly declared that she was now very angry with Richard. Nikki and Marie listened as the girl asked why she always fell in love with such arrogant idiots. Now she was furious, and now she admires nothing about him, her friend only calmly agreed. Putting a cup of tea on a saucer, Nikki said that now it was time for her to stop suffering from unrequited love. Self-flagellation is enough, but a real woman of their time never looks back. The friend decided to do her duty and urged Jasmine to get up, adding that the world was full of men. Looking at her friend's tear-stained face, Nikki literally ordered that this arrogant idiot be erased from her memory. Rising from bed, Jasmine realized that Nikki was absolutely right, and there would be no trace of Richard left in her. With a determined look, the girl replied that she was ready to go and erase her dark history, starting a new path. A few hours later, they decided to attend another celebration so that Jasmine could carry out her plan. Their friend, with dark hair, said that in the modern world, it is stupid to look at only one man. Nikki agreed, saying that there are a lot of outstanding guys around, and everyone needs to be tasted. At that same second, Aisha, another friend, approached them, addressing Nikki with a sweet smile. Without thinking twice, the girl asked if it was she who said that she was going to devote her heart to James. The friend replied that there was still a lot of love in her, so she decided to give him some, so there's no need to worry. And since we are talking about this, she wants to suggest going in search of someone to whom Aisha will dedicate her love. Deciding that this was a good idea, both girls immediately began to leave, notifying their 2 remaining friends. Jasmine said that recently everyone has been studying abroad and preparing to inherit the title. Therefore, she is glad to get together like this for the first time in a long time. The brunette replied that this is their advantage. Richian then asked with a friendly smile what Jasmine wanted to do, calling her cute along the way. Lowering her head, the girl blushed slightly, answering that she didn't know, because she was not used to spending time like that. Richian said that she can do whatever she wants, because now she can no longer restrain herself. This statement inspired Jasmine, because she had previously lived within limits in order to please Richard. The friend did not back down, asking how she viewed taking over secular society into her own hands. In this country, members of the imperial family are the only women who were nobler than her. However, they are not at all interested in connections, which is why they prefer to hunt rather than feast. Or, like those people, they meet with anyone at random in order to relieve the boredom of what is happening around them. Richian smiled, declaring that it was best to replace a past love with a completely new person. Pointing her finger at Jasmine's nose, she added that no matter how bad it was, the mood would improve anyway. Suddenly, their dialogue was interrupted by a familiar voice, which called out to them, forcing them to pay attention to themselves. It was Aisha, who was heading towards them, smiling widely, at the same time asking them to look in her direction. When Jasmine saw her friend next to her, she immediately asked what it was, deciding that she was up to something. Aisha asked her to look towards the wall near which Nikki was standing. There was a lonely guy there. Jasmine noticed a guy with ashen hair, and her friend beamed, asking if she liked him. After all, he never stops looking sideways at her, even though they are standing right in front of him and can see everything. Aisha assumed that he was interested in Jasmine, but the girl herself was surprised by such thoughts. When suddenly, this guy looked straight into her eyes, pretending in surprise that it happened by accident. He then looked away in embarrassment, confirming Aisha's theory, surprising Jasmine. Richian, hiding her lips behind her fan, said that this was the second son of the Marquis Alexander, and his name was Charles. His friends unanimously said that he has a good face and body, and his reputation is quite good, which suits Jasmine. Richian added that he also inherited property from his maternal relatives, which is good. Sharply closing the fan, the girl declared that Jasmine deserved much more, thereby surprising her. Aisha said that he is not particularly eye-catching, but an easy relationship for practice would not hurt her now. Taking a sip of champagne, Jasmine thought that Richian was right, and she could really try her luck. Suddenly, she noticed that Charles began to slowly walk towards her, smiling nervously and awkwardly. Jasmine smiled back, thinking that there was nothing better than erasing old and unpleasant memories. A few days later, she sat near the fountain, lost in her thoughts, waiting for one person. Suddenly, the girl turned her head, hearing a familiar voice calling on her to pay attention. Charles approached her, noticing with a smile that she had arrived first, and then handed her a bouquet of flowers. The guy asked if she would accept him, because he himself prepared this bouquet for the lovely lady. Smiling, Jasmine was pleasantly surprised by the young man's manners, answering that these flowers were very beautiful. Then she thanked the guy, showing him all her politeness and upbringing in order to look even more beautiful. Her impulsively started affair with Charles is not to say that it was very bad, but there were also nuances. First, she spent her whole life chasing one guy, and then she is courted by another man who has an interest. If we talk about Jasmine's feelings for Charles, then it was only an ambiguous hobby, but definitely not love. Charles is always so affectionate and well-mannered, and also such a sweetheart when he's shy. And now she loves it. While she was thinking about this, the guy apologized. Turning to her, she looked questioningly at the gentleman. He decided to ask if she would like to take a walk with him to the lake on his estate next time. Jasmine asked how far it was to the place outside the capital that he spoke about earlier. Charles replied that it was located near the capital, so the journey would take a quarter of a day, and asked not to worry. Jasmine, who always only looked at difficult guys, felt very at ease with Charles. Smiling, the girl replied that she would not refuse his offer, and would be very glad to take a walk with him. Jumping up from his seat, the guy said that this was great news and he would be a good escort. One evening, during which another ball was taking place, Richard walked along the second floor, thinking about something. At that same second, a smiling Neza approached him, joyfully greeting her friend and asking if he was leaving. Having heard an affirmative answer, she said that she had heard that the military leadership was squeezing all the juice out of him. Remembering his father's words, the guy replied that he was under more pressure to talk about marriage than about work. He understands that the sooner he gets married and starts a stable family, the sooner he can retire. With a malicious grin, the girl asked how he tolerated all this, although she herself had glued her flippers together a long time ago. But Richard is so busy, and they don't want to put themselves in his position, because he doesn't even really sleep and works. Naiza also said that his assistant was very worried about him and was not afraid that he might overwork. The guy replied that he, as the head of the family, had to work hard, but he could not finish the sentence. A purple butterfly flew before his eyes, while Naiza asked him not to strain himself. Having not heard an answer, the girl turned to her friend again, asking if he was listening to her at all. Richard suddenly announced that his excellent memory for trifles prevents him from living a carefree life, which surprised Naiza. Then, he drew attention to the huge crowd of guests that had gathered on the ground floor in the courtyard. The girl said that lately there have been parties almost every day. This is the month of high society. Every open area in the imperial palace is filled with aristocrats, and they could join them. After all, when else can they rest, if not at such moments? So now they can go and unwind. He suddenly stopped when he heard someone address Charles, saying that he was dating Jasmine. While Nisa asked him what was wrong, Richard listened as they talked about Jasmine as the flower of society. Turning his head, the guy noticed two guys who were happily talking with the embarrassed Charles. The girl said that this is the second son of the Marquis Alexandra. Apparently, he is now dating Lady Leovani. Richard tried to imagine the couple together, reasoning out loud that they were not suitable for each other at all. But before she had time to speak, Naiza said the exact opposite, rejoicing for the newly made couple. She added that Jasmine has been participating in all the activities lately and has sorted out her feelings for Richard. Let's say the guy answered that it no longer had anything to do with him, but the girl didn't believe it. Suddenly, he heard one of the guys ask how Charles was coping with her rather strong character. He replied that she is very caring towards others, so he thinks that he is very lucky to have her. They immediately told him that he was naive and could be mistaken, but Charles immediately began to deny everything, waving his hands. Nisa said that because she was in love with Richard all this time, everyone is interested in her love life. Her friends said they were like hyenas gathered around a piece of meat, so he didn't take their words seriously. The girl suggested that he relax, ask why he was so angry, but the guy began to deny it. Frowning and smiling slightly, Naiza stated that he was acting very suspiciously by saying such things. Why did they hear Charles say that he invited Jasmine to take a walk by the lake near his estate? Naiza was surprised that they were already visiting each other, noticing fairly rapid progress in the relationship. Richard said that only a month had passed, but the girl did not understand what exactly he wanted to say with this phrase. A man who is unrequitedly in love with another person, Richard understood Jasmine's feelings very well. He wondered if he had acted too rudely with a man who was in exactly the same position as himself. Because of this, he felt guilty. But was she too quick to deal with her feelings for him? Richard thought that her feelings for him were so insignificant that they could be broken in just 1 month. Turning around, the guy said that he was tired and would go to rest. Naiza invited him to listen to the rest of the conversation. However, he suddenly ignored her, after which the girl began to think that Richard had been very strange lately. A few days later, while in the carriage, Charles said that their territory was famous for its wine. Jasmine, who was sitting opposite him, radiated joy and interest in the conversation, listening carefully to the guy. Charles spoke nonstop, deciding to mention one of the distinctive features, but the girl thought that she was tired. He talked endlessly, only about his own things, which made being in his company very boring. Jasmine understands that he is a good person, but that is all, and she does not feel anything serious about him. Closing her eyes, she thought that she wanted to go home as soon as possible, to play cards at home with her brother, and relax. Suddenly, the guy said that he has a lot of hunting grounds on his territory, and Richard often hunts there. Jasmine thought that they had not encountered him at all lately, remembering his last promise. Then he said that he would try not to intersect with her, and it turns out that he avoids her company on purpose. Suddenly, she raised her head, not understanding why she even started thinking about it, because it was even for the better. She hopes that she will not see him for 6 months, or maybe even more. Charles was surprised at her behavior. Suddenly, she asked out loud if Richard thought there were plenty of beauties like her, but he would regret it. She then stated that for the rest of his life, he would swing a sword, look at boring papers, and be covered in wrinkles. Looking at the girl's indignation, which appeared out of the blue, the guy tried to understand what she was talking about. A few days later, Jasmine met with Richard at the next ball, when suddenly they were distracted by a woman's voice. Crown Princess Reina said the wine tasted great today, asking Jasmine if she liked it. A girl with dark long hair and violet eyes looked attentively at the guest. After a couple of seconds of thought, the girl tried to answer that she hadn't really had a chance to taste the taste yet. However, her answer was interrupted by Richard, who asked the Crown Princess if he would accept her as a companion. Jasmine looked at him in surprise, trying to understand what was wrong with him and why he was behaving so strangely. Ignoring this question, Reina asked with genuine interest if they knew each other. Jasmine wanted to answer something, but Richard interrupted her again, saying that he studied with her older brother. The girl looked at him again with a dissatisfied look, asking herself why he didn't let her say even a word. The princess nodded her head, making it clear that she understood everything, but she was interested in completely different details. Without hiding her interest, she said that she had heard that there were conversations between them about marriage. Opening her fan, she added that now he speaks as if he is not close to her at all, but quite the opposite. Lowering his head, Richard briefly replied that he was simply unworthy of her, and that was the only fault for his behavior. Such a serious statement was reflected on Jasmine's face, who lost her breath for a second at these words. Taking a new glass, Reina asked if he decided to be her lawyer today, because he wouldn't let her get a word in edgewise. After all, she almost thought that Jasmine was already his bride, and now he took upon himself the voice of the head of the family. Hearing this, the girl immediately blushed, while the guy standing next to her just put his hand on his temple. Suddenly, they heard the nearby guests begin to whisper that Richard had rejected her proposal. They asked each other why the crown princess decided to ask them this in the middle of the hall. At that same second, Jasmine began to tremble. Richard was the first to draw his attention to this, straightening his tie. He then told Reina that she was going overboard, but the girl just smiled, closing her eyes in a relaxed manner. Playing with the glass, the princess asked what she said, because it was just an innocent joke. But still, she decided to ask Jasmine if she had ruined her mood. She just bit her lip. Having overcome her feelings, the girl smiled, barely able to contain herself, and then replied that she was fine. Satisfied with this answer, Reina asked Richard not to interfere in anyone else's conversation anymore. Through her sweet smile, Jasmine asked herself why she had to stand here and endure this in front of everyone. And why is she forced to stand between these two powerful people and listen to everything, although this is not what she came for? When suddenly, she turned around, out of the corner of her eye, noticing Charles, who was standing to the side and did not take his eyes off her. Looking at the guy in surprise, the girl continued to ask herself why everything turned out this way. A couple of days ago, Charles finally fulfilled his promise and brought Jasmine to his mansion for a walk. While examining the surroundings, the girl said that it was very beautiful here. The guy replied that he knew that she would like it. When they arrived at the villa, everything was simply amazing. A well-kept garden, polite servants, and delicious food. Jasmine thought that today was the best day she had ever spent with Charles, until she heard something. The young man was visited by two friends, who appeared out of nowhere with not particularly pleasant news. They immediately started saying that the owner of the neighboring villa had arrived, and they were talking about the crown princess. She had graceful manners and an impeccable retinue, and there are already rumors in the palace that they want to tell. They also stated that she came with Duke Aion. Hearing this news, Jasmine froze. The guy said that the second sons of Count Kane and Count Yun were also there, and we should take a closer look at them from the good side. At that same second, the girl rose from her seat, declaring that she wanted to take a little walk alone. Hearing such a sudden statement, Charles immediately offered to accompany her, to which he received a sharp refusal. She suggested that he talk to his friends, because he wanted to be alone. Then she went towards the garden. Only now she realized that she shouldn't come here, because it was here that she heard the name that she wants to forget. She feels like she's being terrible to Charles, and she doesn't even like him as a companion. Looking at the red roses, Jasmine thought that she should return home, asking to be taken back. Meanwhile, Charles's friends said that he was doing well with her since she came here with him. Then a question was heard that he could soon become a son-in-law, but the guy did not quite understand what was being said. However, he immediately stated that this could offend her, so he asked his friends not to talk like that in her presence. Approaching them, Jasmine, purely by chance, heard one of the guys ask if they were dating. I don't know that he was being overheard. The guy said that since she came, she could stay here for one night. Hearing these words, the girl froze, trying to understand what he just said and whether she understood him correctly. At that same second, Charles shuddered, loudly asking his comrade not to dare to insult her, because she is far from like that. The guy asked him to calm down, explained that he didn't want to offend her. He just thought that such a turn was possible. Suddenly, they were interrupted by the voice of Jasmine, who in a trembling voice asked what his comrade was thinking about. Charles immediately stopped short, while the girl said that she was interested in hearing what thoughts she came here with. The guy who put forward such a proposal immediately began to hiccup, justifying himself by saying that this was not what he meant. However, the girl abruptly interrupted him, saying that she simply could not help but praise his courage and self-confidence. Looking at him with a cold and intimidating gaze, she asked how he dared to say such dirty words. Suddenly, she turned to Charles, who immediately flinched, having no idea what she wanted to tell him. Jasmine said that she wanted to give him friendly advice, that one should also be able to choose comrades. Depending on who he meets, his class and place in society can change dramatically. Then she asked if he knew that swans and crows were not destined to be friends. This question frightened the guy. Having received no answer, Jasmine announced that she was returning, asking Charles not to accompany her. She thought again that she shouldn't have come here in the first place, but no one can change the past. Watching his companion move further and further away, Charles clenched his fists tightly and wanted to call her back. Suddenly, he was interrupted by the voice of a maid, who ran to the girl, announcing that she had received an invitation. With a confused and incomprehensible look, Jasmine decided to clarify what kind of invitation she had received and from whom. The maid pointed to the envelope, saying that it was from the Jade Villa, and the invitation was sent by the Crown Princess. Without thinking twice, Jasmine decided to accept the invitation, and after some time, she arrived at the place. At that same second, the Crown Princess came out to her, greeting her and saying that she had been waiting for her for a very long time. A smiling Reina extended her hand, saying that this was their first time meeting her in an informal meeting. Kissing her hand in a respectful gesture, Jasmine replied that she was very happy to welcome the star of their empire. The princess replied that she was also glad and really wanted to meet, and since she was nearby, she decided to call. She hoped it wasn't wasting her precious time. Jasmine replied that she was honored. Richard suddenly approached them, and Reina said that she really wanted to meet her, so she decided to invite her. And he began to dissuade her, asking her not to create inconvenience for her and to respect her personal space. Jasmine was stunned when she saw in front of her a man whom she had been trying not to think about all this time. The princess said that he is usually taciturn, but today he said more than he had spoken in a year. Richard Aion has imperial blood, has strong influence in the south, and maintains strict neutrality. Therefore, it was unanimously decided that marrying her would be beneficial for the imperial family. And now, the girl watched how this guy carefreely communicated with the crown princess, without looking at her. Jasmine thought that since they were cousins, they could make fun of each other. At that very moment, Reina apologized, deciding that she had embarrassed her because she just wanted to make fun of him while she could. The princess said that she could relax. It was very beautiful here, so she could spend time with peace of mind. Suggesting they rest, Reina added that the two of them could talk, otherwise they wouldn't be able to find out anything about each other. She then walked away, leaving Richard alone with Jasmine, and there was a pause in the air for the next few seconds. Suddenly, the guy decided to apologize, saying that it seemed to him that because of him, she was having unnecessary troubles. He then suggested that she was spending time with her lover. This phrase stunned the girl. Suddenly, she froze, wondering how he even knew about this if she hadn't told anyone. At the same second, another carriage arrived, from which Charles slowly emerged, surprising Jasmine with his appearance. Frowning at the guy, she did not notice that Richard was literally piercing him with an angry gaze. When they entered the estate, Richard decided to give Jasmine a tour, showing what was where. Periodically glancing at the guy, the girl kept asking herself what it was a minute ago. After all, when she looked from Charles to Richard, saying that she was not the only one invited, she immediately froze. She caught her breath when she noticed the guy's intimidating gaze directed at the visiting guest. He looked very angry, but the girl decided that they had some kind of family disagreement that she was not aware of. She was pulled out of her thoughts by Richard's voice, who said that it was not appropriate for him to ask about this, but he would take the risk. He noticed that she had few belongings, so it was unlikely that she had come here with the intention of staying long. Jasmine replied that she originally came here for one day, so she wanted to refuse the princess's offer. The guy said that there was a large forest and many lakes in the vicinity, so next time she should bring clothes. When suddenly he asked if her lover had warned her about this in advance, Jasmine did not have time to answer. Stopping, she said that he was talking about her lover outside. Did he really mean Charles? Clarifying that he was just a friend to her, Richard said that he decided that the rumors that were circulating in society were true. Jasmine was surprised that such rumors were even circulating, but the guy clarified that people were saying this about her. It seemed absurd to her, because they all lived dissolute lives, denying themselves nothing, and they themselves spread rumors only because she drank tea with him a couple of times, and she never even kissed him. Jasmine asked not to give any importance to this, because soon the rumors will disappear as quickly as they appeared. She will not deny herself something for fear of what other people will think about her decisions. Suddenly, Richard turned to her, thereby forcing the girl to turn around and look in his direction. Looking into his indifferent face, she blushed, carefully waiting for what he wanted to tell her or ask her. Contrary to expectations, the guy lowered his head, saying that he would walk her to the room, after which he took her hand. This gesture made Jasmine flinch, watching closely as Richard showed politeness. Unable to withstand such pressure, she pulled her hand, thanking him and saying that she could manage without his help. With a quick step, Jasmine headed towards her room, leaving the guy standing alone in the corridor. After some time, the girl changed clothes and stood in front of the mirror, immersed in her thoughts. With a flushed face, she thought that she still couldn't calm down because of what happened recently. Richard did the same actions as other men who tried to flirt with her, but there was something different here. Then, she told herself that she was just exaggerating everything. She needed to come to her senses as quickly as possible. Suddenly, she was distracted by her dress, thinking that it was absolutely in her style and looked great on her. The letter said that everything was already prepared for her, so she should come and have a good time. Jasmine understood that they definitely wrote to her for a reason, but she didn't know if there was something else. Looking at her reflection, the girl wondered how long Her Highness had been planning their meeting. An hour later, Jasmine sat opposite the princess, playing cards, and realized that she had lost again. The girl was shocked that she could never win against Reina, no matter how hard she tried to play her cards. She stated that Her Highness could not be defeated. She replied that she was more than confident in herself at cards. When a new game began, Jasmine carefully examined her cards, wanting to defeat her at least once. Noticing the 10 of hearts, she decided to play with this card, and was already preparing to take it out of her sleeve. Suddenly, she heard a voice behind her that said that if she wanted to win, she should leave her. Turning around, the girl noticed Richard, who, noticing her sleeve, said that she needed to throw another card. At that second, she forgot about the game, without taking her eyes off the guy who appeared at such an unexpected moment. Having regained her composure, the girl turned her head away, displeasedly asking why she should listen to him. Taking a seat next to her, Richard smugly replied that he had never lost at cards at the military academy. Jasmine said that he is quite perceptive, but she is not so good and has no idea what the man is up to. Despite hundreds of attempts, she never succeeded. The guy said that it was not necessary to learn this. Changing her facial expression to a dejected one, the girl hardly thought she could use this skill, because it is very useful. Suddenly, Reina entered the conversation, asking if Richard wanted to join the game, helping her win. He constantly refused when she offered to play, so she would only be glad if he joined. At this moment, Jasmine did not understand what was wrong with him, and why he was acting as if he was planning something unclean. The guy sitting at the table with them said that playing with Duke Aion brought back memories from the academy. The last word was with the princess, who suggested that they start the game as soon as possible and stop chattering in vain. The next few minutes passed in suspense, and Richard explained in detail to Jasmine which card was best to use. When everything began to work out for her, a smile reigned on the girl's face, which she decided to share with the guy. After this, their faces became serious as they decided to join forces to defeat the princess. As the game came to an end, Reina closed her eyes that this time Lady Leovanni was still able to win. Hearing this news, Jasmine's face froze in surprise and delight, because for the first time she was able to beat the princess. Unable to contain her emotions, the girl turned her head to Richard, saying that she could not believe that she had won. Giving him a high five, she happily announced that she had won this game for the first time, in response to which the guy smiled slightly. The princess, watching them carefully, said that the two of them looked absolutely perfect next to each other. Startled, and remembering that they were not alone here, Richard embarrassedly asked Reina not to make such statements. Suddenly, Jasmine jumped up from her seat, saying that she felt a little stuffy and would go for a walk. Smiling, she apologized, and the guy, looking after her, thought that now she looked rather pitiful. Going outside, the girl thought that she began to rejoice and smile at him because he helped a little. At this moment, she wanted to quickly return home, but she did not notice how someone approached her from behind. Hearing the appeal, she noticed Charles, who called out to her and said that 1 minute was enough for him. Blushing, the guy with a guilty look asked to give him some of your time before it was too late. Frowning, Jasmine replied that if he wanted to apologize about that conversation, then he shouldn't. The guy said that he should not have allowed the topic to be broached regarding her, so he should apologize to her. Clenching his fists tightly, Charles added that he did not want to remain in her memory as an unworthy and vile man. Looking down, he concluded that perhaps it was selfish of him, but still decided to apologize. After all, if he thought about it, he realized that he had never said these words to her, but now it was time to fix it. Smiling, Charles looked into her eyes, quietly saying that he liked her very much, like no one else. The guy explained that this happened back when, at some party, she performed a serenade on the piano. Then he stood closest to her, watching with delight the girl so enthusiastically playing a beautiful song. It was then that she became his first love. When Jasmine finished, Charles applauded the loudest. After some time, the girl was sitting in the banquet hall and drinking. When her glass was empty, she demanded more. Looking at Jasmine's condition, the guy who was the waiter tried to explain that she had had enough. The girl herself firmly decided that this was not enough, but she asked for some water, and the servant immediately followed her. With her head down, she thought about Charles's recent confession, and still didn't know how to react to it. The picture of his confession was reproduced in her head again and again, because she did not expect such a revelation. Then the guy looked so innocent and sincere, because he doesn't know that Jasmine doesn't have any feelings for him. It seemed that he felt better after confessing, but the girl was unable to give her answer, leaving him confused. The girl suddenly asked herself if she had confessed her feelings to Richard, at least once, and sincerely. Covering her mouth with her fingers, Jasmine thought that she had never tried it, which is why she suffered for several years in a row. Moreover, it is wrong to remember a completely different person after hearing a confession from Charles. She too, like him, wants to talk openly about her feelings, at least once, in order to make it easier. At a tea party a couple of years ago, Nikki was surprised that she still hadn't found the strength to confess to Richard. With a dissatisfied look, Jasmine asked if it was so easy, to which she heard the answer to the question, "Why is it hard?" She just needed to say about it, and that's it. Otherwise, she would continue to suffer because of unrequited love. Suddenly, Richian said that not only did she sleep with someone, she probably didn't even kiss the man. And when, in addition, Jasmine was called a child, the girl's face was full of shock from such a statement. And now she asked not to look down on her, because she, too, could confess and take her first step. At that same second, the girl jumped up from her seat, deciding that she, too, could confess and go further. She remembered Richard's words that he could not leave her in this state, because something dangerous could happen. Not caring about what was happening around, Jasmine said that she would show him how dangerous she could be. At that same second, the waiter approached her, announcing with a smile on his face that he had brought water, but she did not hear him. He tried to understand what was happening with the mistress, but the girl did not respond to any appeals addressed to her. Meanwhile, Richard stood on the balcony, talking with the crown princess, who tried to call out to him. After several unsuccessful attempts, Reina became angry, asking if he had started ignoring her outright. When asked what she wanted, the girl asked with interest what happened between him and the Archduke's daughter. After all, It seemed to her that there was a great atmosphere between them. Closing his eyes, the guy replied that she just imagined it. Raina said that they were simply not honest with each other. Although they had a fight, there was peace between them. Richard replied that this was a friendly matter, after which he asked him to stop bringing up this topic every time. Leaning on the railing, the princess asked to stop being stubborn and make Jasmine yours before he was beaten to it. Raina added that she was no match for Lily, to which the guy angrily asked her to watch her words. When asked why they were being compared, as if they were items at an auction, the princess replied that he needed to think about it. After all, he himself behaves like a little teenager, and she cannot understand what he wants, although he understands her well. Pointing her finger down, the princess asked the guy to look at where Jasmine was walking with a staggering gait. Concluding that she was tormented by thoughts and had too much, Raina suggested that Richard hold her so that she would not fall. But before these words could leave her lips, the guy was already on the first floor, hesitantly approaching the girl. Richard led her into the room and put her to bed, thinking that this was the second time she had been in this state. Looking at her peaceful face, he remembered how widely she smiled when she first won the princess at cards. Suddenly, Jasmine opened her eyes, causing Richard to immediately turn to her to see if she was okay. Rising up and sitting on her knees, the girl told Richard in a smart voice that she liked him very much. Why did she add that she knew he didn't like him? So she asked if he just wanted to sleep with her. Hearing these words, surprise immediately appeared on the guy's face. He couldn't believe that Jasmine could say such a thing. But at that very second, she grabbed him by the chest and then pulled him towards her, carefully examining Richard. With a reddened face and tears in her eyes, the girl concluded that in this way she could quickly forget him. The guy remembered how 7 years ago he was at a banquet, feeling discomfort as the tie was squeezing his throat. At the same time, he thought that his father knew very well that he did not really like attending such events. But in this way, he wanted to hint that he had found a bride for him, and now she was supposed to appear here. When Richard first saw Jasmine, he did not understand what his father wanted from him, because she was probably the same age as Raisha. Turning his head away, the guy decided that it was enough that he had come to this banquet at all, and still hadn't left. Suddenly, an embarrassed girl approached him, taking every step uncertainly, and her head was lowered. Because of this, he himself became nervous. But then he heard the question of whether he could dance his first dance with him. Richard immediately recognized her as Leovani's daughter, and showing signs of politeness, he replied that he was honored. When the melody began to play, they slowly circled in a dance, and the girl did not take her eyes off the Duke's son. Her hands immediately shook due to excitement, and the guy noticed this, looking into her eyes and asking her not to worry. Stating that she was doing great, Richard continued to look at her while Jasmine lowered her head. In his thoughts, Richard compared her reddened face to a plum, and at that time, he thought it was quite cute. And now, when the girl offered to sleep with him, he tried to understand when she managed to become like this. He said that if they continued, she might regret it, but now they could stop so as not to make things worse. However, if she doesn't stop him now, there will be no turning back. But Jasmine said that she likes him, and again she asked him to just spend the night with her, after which she pulled him to her and kissed him passionately on the lips. Richard was taken aback by her behavior and confidence, realizing that her confession had turned him on so much. The day after all this happened, Richard pinned her against the wall and she noticed bruises on his body. She was stunned to also notice scratches and bites, not believing that she could do this to him. However, the guy was not embarrassed by this. Instead, he asked if she was okay, because her face was very red. Jasmine immediately became embarrassed, stutteringly answering that everything was fine, at the same second thinking that he had scared her a little. The guy said that he was glad, because he was worried about her. With a surprised look, the girl did not understand why he was worried. Richard explained that it was all because he couldn't control himself, after which he decided to kiss the girl. Shocked by this behavior, Jasmine could not stand it and sharply pushed the surprised guy away from her. She tried to answer that she was just very surprised when she suddenly noticed that because of her, Richard was biting his lip. Then the girl asked how it happened, to which she received a counter-question. Did she really not remember anything? Jasmine hesitated, not knowing what to answer, but Richard said that judging by her face, she remembered everything perfectly. He then asked if it was a lie when she said that she liked him, but she screamed that they didn't lie about such things. Hanging over her, Richard said that he completely agreed with her, and she would not lie about such personal things. However, Jasmine was now asking herself only one thing. Why was he standing so close to her, practically naked? Putting his arm around her shoulders, the guy said that it seemed like she either really didn't remember or was pretending not to remember. Trying to remove his hand, the girl replied that she was simply surprised and was driven by her emotions because she had too much. Suddenly, the guy announced that the same thing happened to him. Such a statement caused surprise on Jasmine's face. Suddenly, she noticed that Richard took her hand and said that he was not acting as usual and was not in control of himself. Looking at his face, the girl asked why he looked like he didn't regret anything. It was strange. Because they only slept together once, she is a little embarrassed. But for some reason, she feels comfortable around him. The next second, Richard took her hand again, after which he began to kiss her. Jasmine looked at him dumbfounded. However, the guy did not stop there and decided to go further, after which he approached the girl and kissed her on the lips. Jasmine was trying to understand what was happening now, when she suddenly found herself in his arms, without resisting in any way. At the moment, she liked everything, and now they decided to repeat yesterday's, but sober. However, now he looked at her with such a warm gaze that it seemed that he loved her with all his heart. Jasmine was always honest with Richard, from the very first meeting where she was embarrassed in front of him, and after that. When they finished, the girl lay on his chest and asked if it was too much to do this now. Richard explained that this was done because she wanted to pretend that she did not remember anything from yesterday. And now, looking carefully into her face, I went to ask if she still thought so at that moment. He decided that she would again pretend that she didn't know, or that it was a mistake. But Jasmine didn't want to do that. Richard said he was just joking, while the girl thought that 5 minutes ago he was a different person. Then she decided to ask if he was always like this. The guy looked at her in surprise, asking what she was talking about. With an embarrassed look, Jasmine explained that he was a little different when he did it, and when he didn't. Richard thought for a second, but could not find anything to answer. But the girl confirmed that he was very different. Having stood up, the guy said that, let's say, she's right. And since she says it, then he completely agrees with her. Blushing and feeling a hand on her cheek, Jasmine asked herself why he was so kind to her. It was nice. Carefully studying Richard's face, the girl decided that she wanted to find out more about him, as much as possible. Pressing his palm to her cheek, Jasmine asked him to give her that Richard that others don't know about. A few minutes later, they were lying in each other's arms, and suddenly, Jasmine said that this was so amazing. When asked what exactly, she replied that the fact that they were here now. Richard replied that he was not a great man. Therefore, he cannot reject her brave feelings. And he is also moderately shameless, but he has never done so. He looked at the guy who covered his face with his hand, and the girl asked if it could be that he regrets it. Looking at Jasmine in surprise, Richard replied that this was not what he wanted to say at all, but the girl understood it in her own way. He decided to explain that it was worth approaching her with care, and he was only concerned about passion, and he did not think about her. Without looking into his eyes, Jasmine tried to understand whether Richard had always been like this, or whether these feelings manifested themselves next to her. He drew a line and did not allow anyone to cross it, while he behaved as politely as possible. But now everything is different. He is so kind to her that she doubts the reality of what is happening, but she really likes it. Having embraced her, Richard decided to apologize for the fact that she was mistaken because of him. Now he is sincere to her. Looking carefully at the guy, Jasmine asked herself why he had such a stunning and beautiful face. Covering the people with a blanket, the girl blushed, saying that everything was fine. But in reality, she was very embarrassed. There is so much trembling in his soul, and at the same time all his thoughts are confused. He doesn't even know about her feelings, which were unrequited. Suddenly, she remembered Lily, remembering the name clearly, and also remembering that they had even been engaged. She wondered if he still had feelings for her, but her thoughts were interrupted by Richard's voice calling Jasmine. The girl wanted to ask him a question, but something did not allow her to do so, which is why the guy was confused. Looking at the girl, he asked if everything was all right, because she had turned very pale and looked very sick. Lowering his head, Richard guiltily suggested that it was because of him that Jasmine looked so tired. However, there could be another reason. Deciding to voice it, he asked if it could be that she was the one regretting it. He was wondering if she didn't like it, but somehow it turned out unexpectedly. But she began to deny everything. Getting nervous, the girl loudly declared that only he could regret all this, but definitely not she. She added that it was so incredible that her entire inner world was turned upside down, and her thoughts were flying in the clouds. To accept this fact, she needed time to calm down. So they did it so many times. When Richard lowered his eyes and smiled, Jasmine thought in horror that she had blurted out something unnecessary and out of place. But suddenly, the guy burst into loud and sweet laughter, from which there was no condemnation or ridicule. It was the first time she had seen him laugh like that. Just think. It was because of her that he was so cheerful. That's why he didn't date Lily. Only she can decide who she likes, and she does not step over any complex moral principles. She then said that it didn't turn out the way she imagined, but she doesn't regret doing it that way. Jasmine concluded that they both liked it, so she did it, as did he, because he felt good. Suddenly, the guy's laughter died down, replaced by surprise, because he didn't think that he would hear such speeches from Jasmine. Then he smiled again, deciding to say something, but then fell silent, instead taking the girl into his arms. Richard said she was very brave and also sparkling. He had never met anyone like her, and he wondered where such great courage came from in such a small, tender, and defenseless body. Blushing, Jasmine frowned. "Thank you. Does he specifically want to embarrass her now? Or is he saying whatever he thinks?" The guy replied that he was absolutely sincere and did not want to offend or embarrass her in any way, but only to compliment her. Jasmine blushed, turning her head away, trying to understand what was wrong with him, and then asked him to stop seducing her. Suddenly, speech said that, to be honest, he was even sorry that a person who didn't seem to like her like him. The girl tried to understand why he was saying this at all. Maybe he wanted to show friendliness. However, for some reason, I want to continue listening to him, when suddenly Richard suggested they go and take a shower together. Having agreed, Jasmine decided not to take all this seriously, but rather to stop thinking about it altogether. Hearing agreement, the guy kissed her forehead, and the girl thought that now she just wanted to be next to him like this. A few days later, they went out to breakfast with the princess, who said that the food today was excellent. Ignoring Richard's agreement, Reina glanced at Jasmine, who looked sick and quite tired. The princess addressed her, directly saying that she looked pale, and then asked if she was unwell. Startled by the sudden question, the girl was distracted from her thoughts, looking at Reina in surprise. She asked Her Highness not to worry about her, but she did not back down, saying that she had not touched the food. Jasmine explained that she was tired and had no appetite at all. But this did not calm the princess's interest. She stated that the lady said she was tired, which is why she had no appetite, but the Duke had an excellent appetite. Richard, with irritation in his voice, asked why she didn't lag behind him. Reina gave an ambiguous answer. Smiling, Jasmine explained that she was absolutely healthy, after which she thanked them for worrying about her. Raising her glass, Reina replied that she was glad to hear this, after which she recommended that they definitely eat well. After all, if she gets sick, how dare she look at the faces of the Archduke and Archduchess, because she invited her. The girl thought that her mother and father could not even imagine what a wonderful time she had here. She simply went crazy because they did this for 4 whole days without rest, making very rare pauses. They were doing this just like animals, when suddenly she was distracted from her thoughts by a foot that was wandering along her leg under the table. Blushing sharply, the nervous Jasmine realized that she had completely gone crazy, asking herself what she was doing, especially in front of Her Highness, because looking at her, she can understand everything, and it is unknown how she would react. Playing with the glass and looking at the Jasmine, the princess realized that something interesting had happened between them. But at that very second, she decided to turn to Jasmine, who shuddered, trying to control herself. Reina said that after the meal they were going hunting, so she asked him to accompany them. After that, the princess looked at Richard, noticing that he immediately casts his disapproving glance at her. Smiling, Her Highness said that she decided to postpone this lesson until tomorrow. Otherwise, it was going to rain. The next day, after the shot, the guy raised the flag, shouting that the target had been hit. Looking through binoculars, the princess declared that it was excellent, noting that Richard, as always, was in uniform. However, the guy accepted this praise with a stony expression on his face, raising his unloaded rifle upward. Deciding to ask about what interested her so much, Reina asked if everything worked out with Lady Liavani. The guy replied that she had been trying to figure this out since yesterday, but the girl asked not to blame her for anything. Richard asked what she meant, because he had known her for several years, and he knew that this topic was interesting to her. Having set out on the road on horseback, the princess noticed that Richard was very callous in terms of conversation. Despite this, the guy noticed that she was in a great mood. She replied that he would be in a better mood. When the sun blinded Richard, images of his last days flashed before his eyes, in bed with Jasmine. Yesterday, the girl said that the weather was good, but she did not understand why the princess wanted to postpone the hunt. She was pulled out of her thoughts by Reina's voice, who addressed him in a serious tone, stopping her horse at the same time. She then said that he knew the Liavanis were very important to her as a family to deal with. At first, she said it was because of Jonathan, but added that she was worried about the continuity of her title. The love stories of the crown princess were quite popular, and there was a lot of talk about it. Many said that she did not stop those leaving, but greeted those arriving with a friendly and gentle smile. When the guy wanted to touch her cheek, Reina asked with a smile, "Don't do this," but he didn't understand her. The princess explained that she could not allow her fiancé to be sad. Hearing this, the three guys froze in shock. They wanted to answer her something, but the girl was already heading towards the exit, waving her hand at them and saying that she would be on her way. Nisa told Richard that she thought she was crazy, but apparently she had just found her person. She was surprised, since she was not interested in anything except power. And besides, he turned out to be from an ordinary family. The guy replied that as a fellow man with confidence, he can say that Knight Jonathan is a good person. The girl said that she also knew about it, but the emperor did not like him, and that was the problem. And with the heirs, it will be problematic, whatever one may say. For an aristocrat, it is important that the pedigree matches. During the sister's reign, there will be no problems. But as soon as the throne passes to the heir, everything can go wrong. And now, during the hunt, Reina said that, by and large, she didn't care what other people thought about her heir. Instead of a child whose father is an aristocrat from the lower class, Neza can become the head of the state. However, one question bothered her, was whether this would hurt Jonathan, who might, in his heart of hearts, be expecting the right to the throne. Richard thought that he was worried about a man who did not care about any gain or loss. It was strange. He then said that discussing the origins of the imperial family was tantamount to treason, and no one would do such a thing. A man who cannot be pierced even with a needle talks and worries about things that have not even happened yet. Perhaps it was love that made her this way, from a simple desire to want this person and keep him close to her. When the wind rose, the crown princess said that this is why Liavani is an important figure. Noticing the guy's upset look, Reina asked what it was, adding that she deliberately pretended not to notice. Smiling, Reina said that from what she saw at dinner, there was a spark between them. It was surprising to see the other side of an emotionless stone like him that he always hid. The princess asked him to know when to stop. If he is not going to play with her for one season, he must be able to go step by step. Richard replied that he knew this very well, but now he was experiencing new feelings and was trying to figure it out. He wanted to say something else, but suddenly he noticed Jasmine, who was coming out from behind the bushes towards them with a surprised look. A little earlier, the girl was standing near her horse, listening to others say that the Duke had a great attitude. The lady agreed with the guest, saying that this deer would most likely be presented to the crown princess. They also agreed with her, explained that he doesn't have a girlfriend or fiancé, so the gift will be given to Reina. Turning around with dissatisfaction, Jasmine saddled the horse, deciding that all this was so confusing and a little uncomfortable. As she mounted her horse, these sounds attracted the attention of the guests, who immediately fixed their gaze on her. Taking the reins in her hands, the girl thought that these unreasonable glances in her direction were burdensome and stressful. She didn't like being here, so she decided to go further away to have some alone time. Meanwhile, the guests, continuing to sit at the table, decided to discuss everything more openly, noticing that Jasmine had left. The brunette stated that he could barely contain himself. The other guy said that he saw the Duke and lady enter the room together. Everyone was glad that they weren't the only ones witnessing this, after which they thought it was a little strange. After all, one of them heard that they had recently quarreled at a banquet, and that negotiations about their marriage had failed. Moreover, Lady Jasmine abandoned her love and began dating another person. But this is not certain. The lady who was sitting among them said that the relationship between a man and a woman can be very confusing. When asked if she knew something, the girl slammed her fan and firmly said that it was very difficult to hide something like this. She was right. It's unlikely that Jasmine's long, unrequited love died out so quickly, and now it's probably flared up again. Smiling, the lady said that she was not talking about a lady, adding that the love of someone who had not shown it before was terrible. Walking through the forest, Jasmine thought that it was very difficult for her not to even think now, because all sorts of thoughts were creeping into her head. How did it happen that she slept with a man with whom she was unrequitedly in love, and he feels sympathy? Blushing, she decided that this was even more than sympathy. As soon as their eyes met, they immediately became excited. If a man who doesn't know how to pretend does this, then it probably means that he likes her. He doesn't even allow her to do anything. He helps her wash, feeds her, and puts her to bed, showing concern. Stopping, she covered her face with her hands, realizing that she really liked Richard, and now it was showing strongly. She liked him before, but in recent days, this sympathy has reached the point of madness, and she can't help it. Of course, they lie in an embrace. He whispers sweet words in her ear, and she wakes up and falls asleep in his arms. This continues every day, so she is sure that Richard also likes him as much as she likes him. However, whether he liked her as much was a question that she could not answer on her own. Jumping off the horse, she said that there was no disadvantage from this. The only problem was her greed. She wants not only his body, but also his feelings and soul, so that he will always be with her at any moment. She had seen many times how people, after having sex, behave as if they could no longer live without a person. But everything instantly cools down, and people start looking for another person, completely forgetting about past love. She doesn't want her relationship with Richard to become like this. After that, she decided that it was time for her to go again. Jasmine knows that this is all just her desire, but she doesn't want to lose even what she has at the moment. It would be better if she continued to love unrequitedly. Then she would not be scared as she is now, and she would not think about it. Suddenly, the girl stopped and shuddered, deciding that it was Richard's fault that she was tormented by such thoughts. When she thought that this was not unrequited love, but rather mutual, then at that very second, she came across Richard. As soon as the girl appeared in the field of view of the guy and the princess, Reina, with a smile on her face, decided to leave them. When she left, Jasmine and Richard sat down on a large rock, not saying anything to each other, searching for words. Looking at the guy, the girl thought that she didn't want to suddenly meet him here, because now she was confused. With a smile on his face, Richard turned to her, and at this time, Jasmine mentally asked herself not to lose composure. The guy looked in surprise at her reaction, and the girl thought that now she should ask how he felt. The Duke turned to her again, causing her to flinch, realizing that she was too caught up in her internal dialogue. He asked if everything was fine, because she looked thoughtful, smiling. The girl replied that everything was fine. Suddenly, the guy stroked her cheek and said that she was able to get here alone, deciding that it was not without reason. Why did he say that he didn't believe her? Because he saw that she was tormented by thoughts that she didn't dare say. Jasmine noticed that he was so kind and considerate, and his actions made it difficult for her. Smiling again, she asked how his hunt was, and how many were caught, because she heard that there was a big fuss. Having frowned, Richard replied that they didn't catch much. He managed to miss everything he wanted to give her. Jasmine asked in surprise how big a booty he wanted to give her, to which she received an ambiguous answer. Smiling slightly, the guy jokingly said that he would like to give her a small rabbit. This surprised the girl, but suddenly Richard hugged her, frightening her a little with such an unexpected act. Looking carefully into her eyes, he said that she looked like a small white and such a cute rabbit. The concerned girl asked, what if someone saw them? But Richard was not against such a turn of events. She was surprised that he didn't care, even if there were rumors about them. It's surprising that they didn't irritate him. When she realized that Richard was very brave, Her lips closed with the guy's lips, after which she forgot about everything. But suddenly, the guy interrupted the kiss, turning to her and saying that it seemed to him that she was thinking about something else. He tried to find out if she had any thoughts. Looking at his face, Jasmine thought that he was very smart. However, the girl, removing his hand, decided to say directly that it was all because of him, which surprised Richard. The girl said that in her happy life, where everything is enough, only he can be the object of her thoughts. The guy immediately felt awkward, and questions began to torment him. He couldn't understand whether it was a compliment or something else. He suddenly decided that he had made some kind of mistake and decided to ask Jasmine directly about it, clearly nervous. Looking at him, the girl immediately blushed, noticing how suddenly he was confused, which is why he began to stutter. Overcoming her insecurities, she turned her head away, declaring that they knew almost nothing about each other. The guy replied that he knew everything about her, because in recent days his thoughts were occupied only with her. This greatly embarrassed Jasmine, who did not expect such a confession, but said that she had something completely different in mind. Now she was embarrassed to talk about it, but she said that she liked everything connected with him. Blushing even more, she added that they were only doing this, but they were practically not talking. Suddenly, Richard said that he understood what she meant. Looking up at him, the girl felt a little better. He said that she perceives him as an animal who only wants intimacy from her. But this is a little overkill. He thought about it too, but he understood perfectly well that Jasmine overstimulated Richard like no one else. Instead of being polite around her, he wants to touch her, kiss her, and make love to her. But had he ever felt something like that for a girl? He hadn't even felt something like that for Lily. Perhaps all this happened only because Jasmine said that he is far from ideal, as he himself believes. Taking her hand and kissing her, the guy turned to her, apologizing for not restraining himself in his desires. But suddenly, he brought his face closer to her, declaring that he really liked sleeping with her and always wanted to. Such a statement immediately made the girl blush, which is why she loudly and nervously asked what he was talking about. She then added that she meant that they needed to talk because they were moving forward too quickly. Richard asked if this was a problem, since he likes things to happen quickly and easily. Jasmine replied that they need to open up to each other, not just that which is limited to physical contact. Looking at the guy, the girl noticed that he was now in deep thought over her proposal. He thought about it so seriously, although it was not such a big problem, but she decided that it would be difficult with him. Half an hour later, the noble lady, covering her lips with a fan, was stunned by the deer lying in front of her. She stated that this was the largest deer caught, and the others supported her, saying that it was amazing, after which they began to shower the Duke of Iona with compliments, flatteringly saying that they would not have expected anything else from him. The lady then turned to Jasmine, saying that if this was a hunting tournament, she would definitely win. Suddenly, she announced that the Duke had decided to throw this deer in front of her, and that meant a lot. Before Jasmine could ask what she meant, Richard knelt in front of her, calling her to him. Then, he announced that he wanted to give his catch of today's hunt to the most beautiful lady present. Smiling, she extended her hand to him and politely thanked him, asking in a whisper what he was doing now. Leaning over, the girl whispered that she didn't want him to make such a fuss in front of the nobles. She flinched when the guy asked if she didn't expect specific actions like this from him. The people watching cried out in shock that the Duke showed gentlemanly respect for Lady Liavani. At the same second, Richard rose from his knees, putting Jasmine's hand to his forehead, thereby surprising her. Gentlemanly respect is the highest respect that can be shown to a noble lady. And now Jasmine was in complete shock, asking the guy in a loud whisper why he was doing all this. "I kiss her hand." He replied that she said that they were in too much of a hurry, and he completely agreed with her opinion. When asked why he was in a hurry, he said that as soon as he sees her comma, his thirst awakens. Because of this, for some reason he begins to rush things, because he wants to express everything that he can give her. Clenching his hand into a fist, he added that they really didn't know much about each other, and he couldn't argue with that. But that gap could begin to be filled from now on. But then he decided to ask if she felt the same way. Having not heard an answer, he said that in order to get to know each other better, they need to make their relationship more official, so that they are not embarrassed by the views of strangers, and they can calmly spend time together, without worrying about rumors. Hearing a hesitant agreement, Richard asked himself why she looked like she was unhappy about something. Turning her head away from him, the girl tried to understand whether Richard even understood her words and what she wanted to convey, when suddenly her gaze turned to the people who had been watching them all this time, whispering about something along the way. Jasmine noticed that some looked at them with delight, but the princess seemed not at all surprised. The stunned girl immediately blushed, only now realizing that all their eyes were focused on them. Then she nervously hurried to tell the guy that people were staring at them, but he was calm. While the girl invited him to walk a little, Richard carefully looked at her shy face. Realizing that he couldn't hear her, Jasmine decided to step on his foot, after which he came to his senses and agreed. Closing his eyes, he thought about how he almost got into trouble. Just a little more, and he would have kissed her right there, in front of everyone. After a while, he continued to think that if they were engaged, he could kiss her whenever he wanted. And now, while walking with Jasmine, he tried to understand why he refused to enter into this marriage then. He remembered how Neza told him to quickly forget his past love, because this way he would burden Lily. Richard stopped, putting his hand on his face, realizing why he did this. Jasmine looked at him questioningly. When asked what happened, the man smiled, saying that it was nothing, and because of her, he had already forgotten about everything. Suddenly, the guy remembered how 7 years ago his sister, sobbing loudly, said that she hated Neza very much. When she left, Richard said that she was going too far, because she started bullying her again. He asked her to have moderation in everything, because she doesn't hate her. So there's no point in making her cry. Neza replied that she is so cute when she cries. Such a statement surprised the guy, because it was a stupid reason. The girl added that when she sees something so cute, she just wants to pinch it and take a bite of it. Richard did not share her joy, again saying that there was no need to overdo it, because she would really hate her. And now, when she and Jasmine returned to the mansion, the girl was lying on the bed, devouring cookies with gusto. The guy brought her a glass of juice, asked if she likes it, because at such moments she begins to look for sweets. So she answered that someone did not let her out of the stable, so she was tired, and because of this, she was drawn to sweets. Taking the glass from her hand, she heard a man's laughter, after which she asked with a dissatisfied look what was so funny. With a smile on his face, Richard asked me to blame him myself, because she was the one who was so sweet and alluring. Slowly approaching her, he said that when he looks at her, he immediately remembers Neza's words. Jasmine was surprised, which made her curious about what the princess was saying and how it related to her. Putting his hand on her lap, the guy replied that she said not to tolerate it if there was something very cute nearby. Throwing his hand away, Jasmine replied that this was nonsense, adding that he was also quietly reaching out to her with his fingers. She had previously told him not to touch her when she was eating, and smiling, the guy realized that the attempt was a failure. Then he asked for at least a kiss, but the girl decided to refuse him even then, deciding to eat in peace. However, this time, he was more decisive, which is why he approached her, causing the girl to blush. But as luck would have it, at that moment, there was a knock on the door, demanding attention, and his lordship immediately called. The voice behind the door said that the crown princess was calling him, and immediately expected the guy in the living room. A few minutes later, Richard arrived at the appointed place, while Reina was surprised by his lewd appearance. The dissatisfied guy sat in only a robe, crossing his arms over his chest, not daring to even look the princess in the eyes. The girl asked with a smile if he was demonstrating his protest, but Richard answered in the negative. He explained this by saying that it was she who called him to her place early in the morning, without even giving him time to get dressed. Reina replied in surprise that it was already midday outside, and a ray of sun was drilling into the back of his head right now. Richard ignored this news, after which he displeasedly asked for what purpose she called him. The girl replied that, judging by his behavior, she apparently interfered with his good time. He asked her not to waste time, to which the girl stated that he had been so funny lately, that's why she called him. Noticing Richard's thoughtful face, she didn't understand why he became so serious, because everything was going well between them. She wanted to take a sip of tea when she suddenly froze when she heard the guy say that he needed to propose. After asking again, Richard replied that he wanted to propose to Jasmine, the daughter of Archduke Liavani. Reina was surprised, because after yesterday, She thought that he would make some kind of official statement. At first, she thought he was joking, but she immediately begged for this thought, realizing that he already wanted to propose. Paying attention to his serious gaze, it seemed to her that he had become as crazy as he was before. Then the princess said that she was only glad to hear such news, but there were some moments that embarrassed her. With a smile on her face, she began to ask if everything would be okay, because, as it seemed to her, it was too early to think about it. Taking a sip of tea, Richard replied that he would propose anyway, so there was no point in delaying it. Raina said in shock that although she liked him, she might not agree, because there was a scandal between them. With a calm expression on his face, the guy asked if Neza told her this, receiving an affirmative answer. He then said that Jasmine might reject his proposal, but he believed that he could persuade her. Since he has no other choice, he will try his best to get her recognition. Looking carefully at her brother, the princess still could not believe that he was planning to give his all. She wanted to joke and ask about plans for the upcoming banquet, but she didn't think he was so serious. But at that very second, she decided to put jokes aside and crossed her arms over her chest and said that he was in a hurry. Their relationship lasts no longer than a week, and she says this not as a princess to the Duke, but as his cousin. She then asked if he was confusing this relationship with a momentary treatment that would take time. Richard, in a slightly dissatisfied tone, decided to ask if he looked like some kind of fool, so as not to distinguish this. The princess replied in the same manner that she was asking about this because this option was not excluded. Closing his eyes, the guy said that this was not a momentary attraction or an impulsive decision, but his feelings. Raina tried not to raise her voice, but wanted to fully understand the situation by asking why he was so confident. She said this because she knew Richard had never been this emotional until recently, but it is precisely these feelings that can turn a person into a complete idiot who can act irrationally. Then she decided to ask directly, in all seriousness, whether he loved her, and then began to wait for an answer. The guy asked in surprise whether it was so important. Upon hearing this, the princess froze, not fully understanding his words. Without hesitation, Richard said that he sincerely wanted her, but did not specify in what way he meant. Keeping a serious expression on her face, the crown princess asked how long his sincerity would be enough. He replied that when she is not around, he begins to get angry and cannot sleep, which makes him even more angry. Raina said that if her ears do not lie to her, then his words sound to her as if he loves her very much. When asked if she thought so, the girl replied with a grin that this was a very strange question, because these were his feelings. Richard thought about the fact that love is not such a feeling. In his understanding, it was something completely different. Love is a manifestation of tenderness, warmth, and care for a person with whom you do not want to part with even for a minute. About his neighbor is higher than all his desires and feelings, and he sees a huge difference in his feelings and love. When a strong desire to take possession of her begins to dominate and bring her smiles, he begins to feel a pounding in his chest. This cannot be called love. It is only a pure and irresistible passion that does not want to fade away in him. This sticky feeling, heavy as a swamp, cannot be considered love, so he did not know what to call it. Now, it just seemed to him that he couldn't live without her, and that's why he suddenly decided to take this important step. Looking at the seriousness with which the guy thought about this, Raina thought that he seemed confused himself. This is his first time doing this, so it's not surprising. But the only thing she doesn't like is that it's too early. They need Archduke Leovani's family, but not so much as to gamble his future on such a decision. Richard agreed and explained that this was not only because of her warning. Raina replied that she knew this very well, and also knows about his disgusting character, when it is impossible to force him to do what he does not want. When asked if he wanted to propose in the capital, the guy replied that first he needed to ask Jasmine. Meanwhile, a few minutes ago, Jasmine woke up from a deep sleep, asking where Richard had gone. Remembering that it was the crown princess who called him, the girl rubbed her eyes, slowly getting out of bed. Putting on slippers, Jasmine assumed that he had gone somewhere along the road, after which she drew attention to the flowers. She remembered how the guy asked what she wanted, to which she received the answer that he wanted to receive a bouquet of flowers. She explained that when someone gives flowers, it becomes very nice, and girls do not always want something incredible. Sometimes they just need something very simple, Then Richard said that he was ready to give her a whole garden of flowers. Then his face turned out to be so loving, she almost lost her head with excitement. But she controlled herself. She then covered her mouth with her hand as she realized that Richard loved her, causing her to unconsciously laugh out of emotion. At that very second, she felt hot, and she began to wave her palm towards her face, deciding that this could not happen. Noticeably quickening her pace, Jasmine thought with a smile that she was simply mistaken, and this was just physical attraction. Suddenly she stopped, hearing voices from the room in which the door was slightly open. She heard Raina say that they wanted the Archduke's family, but not enough to risk Richard's future. Also, the girl managed to hear about the question about the proposal, and I said that he should ask her first. Jasmine froze, and everything went cold inside as she tried to understand what they had just talked about. As she walked down the corridor, Richard's phrase that this was not because of her warning echoed in her head. Jasmine knew that the crown princess wanted her relationship with him to work out, but she didn't expect this. When she entered the room, she didn't think it would be serious enough to give him any warning. He is very secretive and doesn't share much, but he told the princess about such personal things. He is also an aristocrat, and she understands this. At least she tries to. But now the question was about something else. Falling onto the bed, Jasmine tried to understand why she was in so much pain, and now she felt as if she had been betrayed. Clutching the sheet tightly, she decided that she wanted too much, thinking that it sounded childish. Having cried, the girl thought that it would be better if he told her everything. Then she would not be so disappointed in him. Then she wondered what she knew about him at all, because she thought that she knew a lot about him, but she was deeply mistaken. Now there were 1,000 questions in her head. Whether he sincerely liked her, how much, and to what extent. And most importantly, his feelings are as pure as hers. But probably not. Otherwise, there would not have been a conversation with the princess. Jasmine decided that he was just interested in playing with her. Unlike that Lily, she turned out to be more accessible. Now she was very sad. She wouldn't want to turn back time, so as not to know anything about it. Suddenly, the door opened, and Richard entered the room with a beautiful bouquet of flowers, asking if she was still sleeping. Approaching the bed and seeing the wrapped-up girl, he said that it's not for nothing that they say that beauties are sleepyheads. Not knowing that Jasmine was bursting into tears, he moved closer and said that he had brought flowers that she would like. At that moment, the girl decided that she was so ashamed that she thought that he felt the same way as her. But at the same time, she was tormented by the thought that she now looked very pitiful. But he had no idea about it. Some time later, when Jasmine woke up, the maid said with sadness in her voice that the flowers had already withered. Hearing my lady's sleepy voice, the maid turned her head, noticing that she was already awake. Turning her attention to the window, Jasmine realized that the sun was already setting, which meant she had slept all day. Then she was informed that the Duke of Aion had visited her several times. This news made her sad again. Smiling, the maid told the lady that she would bring the vase right away. The girl agreed without much enthusiasm. Before leaving, she offered to bring her something to eat at the same time, but Jasmine said that she had no appetite. Hugging herself, the girl thought that her head was pounding and her body was shaking violently. This had not happened since childhood. At first, she decided that it was worth calling a doctor. But would he be able to offer her a cure for her emotional wounds? Suddenly, the door opened. Richard stood behind it, while the maid said that it was better not to disturb her. Suddenly, the guy froze when he found Jasmine, with her eyes red and swollen from crying. Approaching her bed, he immediately began to ask what happened, to which he heard the answer that everything was fine. However, Richard did not back down, clearly noticing some kind of problem, after which he began to inquire whether something hurt her. Jasmine replied that she was tired for the period, and that she didn't feel well. She would take a break, and everything would pass. The guy reminded her about food, because she had not eaten anything yet. Without looking him in the eyes, she replied that she was not hungry at all. In a concerned tone, Richard said that this would only make things worse, suggesting that she ask her to make soup for her. She turned to him in a businesslike tone, asking if he could leave her room because she wanted to rest. The guy froze, trying to ask what it had just said, but Jasmine repeated that she asked him to leave. When she looked at him, her eyes were cold and full of anger. Why did she ask if he heard her? Richard guiltily replied that he would fulfill her request and send a doctor to her, and then wished her recovery. However, the girl refused the doctor, while the guy tried to insist, because her condition would only worsen. Then Jasmine asked what difference it made to him. It was bad for her, not him. Now she just needed to be left alone. Hearing the cold tone in which this was said, Richard and the maid froze, not knowing what to answer. The last time she asked them to leave, the guy was standing in front of the door, wanting to rush back in again. Late in the evening, Jasmine read a letter from James, who addressed her as a reckless sister. He said that the crown princess had contacted them, and then asked when she was going to return. He had already forgotten her face, and the girl decided with a smile that he was stupid and worried for nothing. He also wrote that if she did not answer him, he would come for her. This news managed to stun Jasmine. Jumping from the railing onto the balcony, the girl asked out loud where he was going to come, simultaneously calling him an idiot. Although, considering that this is James, he may indeed show up. We need to give him an answer as soon as possible. Come to think of it, she was very fickle, and just a couple of hours ago, she had no appetite at all. Sitting down at her desk, she concluded that an empty stomach was harmful to mental and physical health. Suddenly, her gaze fell on a piece of paper that was lying on the table. It was a letter that she was writing to Richard. Reaching for the pen, Jasmine decided that she would first send the letter to her brother. It was more important. And then finish this. She answered her brother that she was very comfortable here, so there was no need to worry about her, and her days were passing interestingly. At the end, she added that she would return soon, so she asked to meet him with cordiality and warmth. However, the girl understood that she was far from comfortable here, and not at all happy, and the letter looked ridiculous. After her arrival at this country house, all her thoughts were occupied with Richard, and she did not even think about it. Even if it's selfish, there's nothing you can do, Mom said. To be happy, you need to be selfish. This was back in childhood. My mother said that a person should be moderately selfish in order to be happy. First of all, she herself must be happy, so that the people around her can also be happy. Giving or devoting oneself to others is not altruism. She then asked if she was familiar with the concept of altruism. Jasmine lied and answered yes, but her mom said it was okay if she didn't know yet. However, she must not forget that the desire to appear too perfect in front of others is not the same as love. You need to understand the difference in this in advance, so as not to end up in a terrible situation and not suffer in vain. Then Jasmine did not understand anything and simply nodded. She was a naive child, and such problems did not concern her. But now it seems to her that she has begun to understand the wisdom of the mother who wanted happiness for her daughter. She didn't know what love was. It was probably some kind of foreign, confusing, difficult and painful feeling. Sighing heavily, the girl said that it was very difficult, and now she did not want to burden her head with such thoughts. However, now her thoughts were occupied with the fact that she needed to talk to Richard and listen to his position. At the end of the letter, she asked if he would like to join her and take a walk together along the shore of the lake. Having sealed the envelope and decorated it with a flower, the girl was pleased with the work done, even managing to smile. Heading towards the door, she decided to ask for these 2 letters to be sent as soon as possible, so as not to delay. Since she's already eaten, maybe she should get some fresh air and walk around the garden before it's too late. About an hour ago, she asked the maid to bring her a piece of cake, and she hoped that she had not fallen asleep yet. Opening the door with a joyful expression on her face, she walked forward, thinking about the chocolate cake that was so delicious. Suddenly, opening her eyes, she noticed a man in front of her, after which she began to slowly raise her head. She looked in surprise at the guy who stood silently in front of her with a serious expression on his face, without saying a word. After a while, walking through the garden, the girl asked since when he had been here. He replied that he had noticed the maid. Embarrassed, Jasmine said that she wrote him a letter, offering to meet tomorrow, but it was no longer needed. Suddenly, the guy turned in her direction, asking how she was and if she was okay, although his tone was distant. Blushing a little, Jasmine hesitantly apologized for being overly sensitive and upset at the time. She wanted to sort out her thoughts, but he was there. It was hard for her, but now she feels better. At that very moment, Richard decided to ask if he could kiss her. This question puzzled the girl. Without waiting for an answer, the guy approached her and then embraced her in a passionate kiss, which greatly surprised her. Jasmine tried to fight her feelings, and after working up the courage, she pushed Richard away. Lowering her head, she asked him to stop in a depressed voice, because now she was not in the mood for such a thing. At that very moment, she asked him to stop, addressing him as Lord Aion, causing him to smile. Suddenly, the guy replied that he understood that he shouldn't have bothered a person who had not yet fully recovered. The girl was surprised, asking herself why he showed me displeasure. She thought that he would be angry at her refusal. Placing her brush in the outstretched hand, Jasmine agreed and said that the spring wind was still very cold. The closer they got to the mansion, the more often the girl glanced at the guy, asking herself what he was thinking about. Remembering the words that she had overheard from the crown princess, Jasmine concluded that she was right. It was really too early, and besides, it all started with an ordinary incident, and everything started spinning on its own. However, she did not understand why he should propose, or perhaps she was simply satisfied with him, and that was enough. Perhaps this could be due to the responsibility of spending the first night with a naive girl from a very noble family. But the last thing Jasmine thought was that he might really truly love her. Richard looked in surprise at the girl, who suddenly burst out laughing and then trembled, holding back her laughter. He decided to ask her what happened, after which he gave her a little time to come to her senses and calm down. Smiling and wiping away tears, Jasmine replied that one crazy thought came into her head, but nothing important. Lowering her eyes, she thought that she was laughing at herself. How pitiful it must look from the outside. Without letting up, Richard decided to ask what she was thinking about, because he didn't know what she might consider crazy. The girl said that just a couple of days ago, she couldn't even imagine that they could hold hands like that. Richard said that there was much more between them than that. Jasmine replied that it was surprising for her too. Taking the girl by the hand, he pulled her, saying that he did not understand how he had lived until then without touching these hands. During the summer season, the glass garden with roses is illuminated 24 hours a day, where she can feel better. Suddenly, the guy fell silent, asking the girl what happened, noticing how tears began to flow from her eyes. Richard assumed that she was hurting somewhere, which is why she began to restlessly circle around her and ask questions. He suddenly decided that she didn't like roses, after which he wanted to apologize, but immediately fell silent, his eyes widening. Jasmine's words immediately surfaced in his memory, saying that only he could be the object of her thoughts. Looking at the tearful girl, Richard assumed with horror that now she was shedding tears because of him. Without raising her head, Jasmine barely audibly addressed the guy, asking what he thought of her as a person. She wondered what she meant and who she was to him, and at this moment she needed this knowledge. Previously, he said that he liked her, but did not specify how strong her sympathy was for him. The guy did not understand what she meant, after which he tried to say what he really felt, but fell silent. He was interrupted by Jasmine's gaze, and Richard asked himself why she was looking at him so appraisingly and coldly. He opened his mouth but couldn't say anything, wondering why her face seemed so alien. Suddenly, the girl said that they needed the Liavani family, but not so much as to gamble the future. Why did she retell a few more phrases, quoting them word for word, carefully observing Richard's reaction? The guy frowned, loudly and displeasedly, asking if she had heard their conversation with the crown princess. Jasmine replied that when she woke up, he was not there, went out to look for him, and heard their fascinating conversation. With an irritated look, the guy swore, after which he stated that she had misunderstood everything, and he would explain everything. Starting to shout, he asked where she heard from, and to where. He needed to find out all the details. Closing her eyes, the girl stopped him and asked him to calm down, and then speak slowly and calmly. She herself judiciously thought that, judging by his violent reaction, apparently, she already meant something to him. In any case, the fact that he has at least some feelings for her is comforting, but not completely reassuring. Clenching his hands tightly into a fist, the man tried not to spill his emotions out, saying that it was a misunderstanding. Covering his face with his hand, he added that he wanted to further strengthen their relationship by proposing to her. And all this should not have happened for the reason you thought. And now she did not understand the essence of what was happening. Jasmine replied that she knew that the crown princess wanted reliable support from her family. Therefore, it is beneficial for her for their relationship to reach a new level, and even better, to be consolidated by marriage. And perhaps she planned everything from the very beginning, which is why she invited her to visit under the pretext of friendship. But what surprised her was that a man like him would choose to involve his personal feelings in political affairs. Hearing this, Richard came into open shock, without hesitation declaring that this was not true at all, and she was wrong. Jasmine replied that she might not know something, but she could imagine the whole picture in general terms by watching him, and she knows very well that he can never be forced to do what he doesn't want. She heard that too. The guy continued to insist that everything was wrong, after which he asked to listen to him to figure it out. Interrupting him, she said that she knew that because of this, he expresses his feelings without hesitation, and so truthfully. Although they have been acting for the past few days as if none of this exists, the truth is completely different. Hugging herself, the girl concluded that both he and she were no longer children at all, and now the matter would not be settled with simple apologies. With horror in his eyes, Richard wanted to answer something, but then suddenly fell silent, not being sure that everything was wrong. After all, he himself understands that all her words are partly true, and he cannot argue with this. Even if Richard's mind became clouded, and he decided to spend the night with someone, he would approach the matter responsibly. He would have a serious conversation with the woman about this, showing maximum respect for Jasmine and her feelings and desires. Everything would have come to the wedding, but he had no interest in girls after the news of Lily's marriage. If the daughter of the Liovani family became her passion, the emperor and all vassals would approve of her candidacy. And if he were that past Richard, he would obediently follow this path. But now he doesn't think so. Pictures flashed before his eyes when he first saw them the morning after their first night together. He wanted to mock Jasmine, who wanted to pretend she didn't remember the previous night. And they spent time in bed again. He wanted to spend more time with her, just to talk. And she never ceased to charm and excite him, so he wanted to keep her close to him. It was only because he wanted to keep her close that he made a hasty and very stupid decision. If, as Jasmine said, he had been his old self and did it for political purposes, then he would have persuaded her. But now the situation was completely different, and the current one is at a loss because of the situation and his feelings. Jasmine replied that she was confused because of his words and actions. She was mistaken in what she saw. He constantly said that he was comfortable being with her, but it was all because of her position in society. And she fell for it so stupidly, ceasing to think rationally, completely succumbing to her feelings and desires. Extending his hand, Richard again stated that this was not so, but the girl said that everything was fine and she understood everything. The guy cried out that she was mistaken because she never agreed to listen to what he wanted to tell her. Taking her by the shoulders, he declared that she was a very valuable person to him, and he had said many times that he liked her. Richard asked himself why she didn't understand his feelings. In his entire life, he had never revealed his soul to anyone like that. The conversation with the crown princess concerned their relationship and his feelings, but it was not political in nature. The gist of it was that he wanted to propose to her, but he knew that now she did not understand him. Therefore, he decided to first discuss everything with her, because she knows that he cannot fake feelings and emotions. She heard only part of the conversation and misunderstood it, so she got angry, even without really understanding the situation. After a couple of seconds, Jasmine replied that in this case, she didn't understand anything about what was happening. Suddenly, she screamed that he didn't even mention this topic with her, but decided to discuss it with someone else. The girl asked if he cared about her opinion, because did she ever say that she wanted this now? Looking at the girl dumbfounded, Richard said that it turns out she doesn't want him, but did not specify in what sense. Jasmine replied that she didn't mean that, but Richard said that she was the one who proposed to him first. But the girl countered with the fact that then he refused her, because of which she suffered for a long time and could not come to her senses. The guy agreed, adding that he made a terrible mistake, and now he very much regrets his choice. She couldn't believe it, because he himself decided to miss this opportunity, and now he's trying to convince her otherwise. Approaching her, Richard said that he had acted stupidly and immaturely, so he wanted to return everything and try again. Starting to scream, the girl asked when he had time to change his mind, because so many months had passed since then. Just a month ago, he didn't think about this, but now he's trying so ardently to prove his love to her. It all started between them when they spent the night together. But before that, they did not confess to each other. If they had not met in a country house, if she had not gotten drunk that night, then nothing would have changed. After all, initially, he was not interested in her at all, and did not even look in her direction, not to mention anything more. If it weren't for all this, given his principles, he would have completely forgotten about his refusal, continuing to live his life. Lowering his eyes, Richard replied that he did not deny this, after which he added that then he did not know her well as a girl. But he did not stop worrying and feeling guilty for this. He did not want to hurt her and make her even worse than it was. But when he met her again, he tried to show concern for her and tried to put all of himself into making her happy. And when, having drunk, she extended her hands to him and confessed her feelings, he was very happy and excited. She was wonderful when she plucked up the courage and honestly admitted her feelings. That's when he understood everything. Everything is confused in Richard's head. He can't understand the current situation because they liked each other. The guy said he was confused, and to be honest, he didn't understand why she was so angry. After all this time he thought that she belonged to him. From this statement, Jasmine froze in complete stupor. Her eyes widened, and her brows furrowed as the phrase echoed endlessly in her head. They slept together. Because of this, he thought that she belonged to him. Richard said something, but Jasmine did not listen. At that very second, it dawned on her, and she stated that he did not like her, and he was only attracted to her physically. He behaves like a little boy who doesn't want his toy to be taken away. He feels sorry for losing it. Richard asked why I seemed like that, and why she was sure that he liked me, that it was all fake. Approaching her as close as possible, the guy loudly declared that now even he could not understand himself. Yes, but he wants her. He wants her to look only at him, and he wants everyone to know that she is his. When he sees how sweet she is smiling at others, he wants to take her away from everyone and hide her from prying eyes. It pisses him off when other men glance in her direction, even though he doesn't show it on the outside. Grabbing her hands, Richard said that he really liked her, but the girl asked him to let her go. However, the guy did not back down, saying that even now he wants her, but now Jasmine did not share his desire. He said that when he lies in an embrace with her, everything that worried him suddenly becomes unimportant. And how can it mean nothing? Because she doesn't even understand how pleasant it is for him to hug her even now. At this moment, Jasmine felt extremely uncomfortable, so she asked Richard to leave. He didn't back down. I think that even her evil gaze looks cute. He wants to torment her, but at the same time hug her. But looking at her with malice in his eyes, he thought that she was so beautiful that he wanted to destroy her. And if she needed proof, then he suggested that she do it here, and don't care if people can see it. He then asked if she wanted him. Didn't she want the same thing as him? So he didn't understand why she was making it difficult. After all, she herself was the first to start all this. Now she looks at him with eyes full of hatred. And where is her responsibility? Jasmine shouted that responsibility was the reason why he wanted to propose without feeling love. The guy shouted that everything was wrong because he said that he liked her, then asked why she didn't believe him. He suddenly fell silent, barely containing his anger, trying to understand how all this quarrel had started. He asked himself to calm down, because if he continues to be angry, it will hurt Jasmine. He needs to behave as usual. Well, why did he say that if she thinks that his feelings are not real? Then fine. But he will propose anyway. What difference does it make what feelings he experiences? He is the only man who suits her in body and soul. He then said that she loved him, but did not receive any reaction in return, and decided to continue talking. If she loves, she will make a choice in his favor. She needs to think and make a decision that will benefit her. In any case, he is now a fool obsessed with her, so he will be useful if the girl tame him. He wanted to say that he would do whatever she wanted, but he immediately fell silent, noticing with horror how tears came from her eyes. Richard extended his hand to her, wanting to calm her down and find out why she suddenly cried, and if he said something wrong. But Jasmine angrily pushed his hand away, in a barely audible whisper, offering to stop everything and end it there. Richard couldn't believe what he had just heard, so he decided to ask again, hoping that he heard it right. Lowering her head, Jasmine more loudly and confidently offered to finish everything, adding that she tried her best. Then she added that it would be better for both of them. At that moment, the guy drooped, not wanting to believe what was happening. Coming close to her, Richard asked why she said that, because he did not want their relationship to end. The girl replied that everything was confusing and happening at the wrong time, and they were not originally destined to be together. When she was about to leave, the guy turned around, loudly asking if she was sure that she wanted to end everything. She did not want her loved one to so easily give up his feelings and love for her because of politics. She doesn't want him to bear this responsibility because of his kindness and to date her by resorting to deception. At the end, Jasmine added that the wind was cold and asked to go home, but Richard decided to stop her. When he realized that this would not help, it was the same one who fell to his knees, begging her not to leave, asking for forgiveness. The guy said that he was wrong, so he asks to forgive him just once, and then he will try his best. Turning to him, the girl displeasedly asked why everything is always so easy for him, and everything is solved by itself. And he refuses easily and changes his mind easily. For him, even marriage is nonsense, and he also easily gets to his knees. It is always difficult and painful for her with him, but she will not be confused because he bowed his head. Richard replied that this was not true, but Jasmine firmly stated that this was a lie, and now he wants to buy her with it. She knew that he did everything to get what he wanted, no matter how much effort he had to put in. The girl asked him to stand up if he did not want to torture her with his actions, which were of no use anyway. The guy thought that he also took advantage of her feelings for him and decided to play the desired role, contrary to his wishes. If his assumptions were correct, she would take his hand, and this would be the most reasonable decision. However, he was mistaken, simply not knowing what love is, and he tried to manipulate her and take advantage of her feelings. Rising from his knees, Richard apologized to the girl for hurting her, but she asked him to score. She doesn't want to continue this repetitive verbal altercation anymore, as she's pretty tired of it. The guy grabbed her hand, but she turned around sharply and pulled it out, loudly asking not to touch her. She warned him that she would disappear, and he had better maintain his dignity and not follow her around. Finally, the girl said that she was tired of him, after which she walked proudly towards the house. Returning to her room, Marie noticed Jasmine, asking if she was okay, looking at her flushed face. Having stopped, the girl said that she had stayed here too long, so it was time to leave this place. Turning around, Jasmine asked why she got up, after which she gave the order to quickly pack her things to leave. The maid bowed, trying to understand why her mistress made such a spontaneous decision at such a late hour. A few minutes later, Marie turned to Jasmine, curiously asking what she should do with the scarf. The girl immediately remembered how one day she and Richard went on a picnic, deciding to spend time together. She said that the sky was repainted the color of sunset. The guy replied that time passes quickly with her. It's even a pity. He then stated that he wanted more, but Jasmine lightly hit him on the chest, answering that that was enough for today. Suddenly, he jumped up from his seat, and the girl loudly repeated that she said it was impossible today. But, contrary to her expectations, Richard only put the balls on her that as soon as the sun goes down, it will become cold in the forest. Feeling warm, Jasmine said that he was very attentive, and then asked where he got the scarf from. The guy answered with a smile that it was left from his mother. The girl was shocked and did not expect such a gift. She said that this was probably a very important thing for him, to which she received the answer that everything was fine and it suited her. His mother and aunt were best friends. They and their family often came to the residence, but he doesn't remember those times well. Because of this, traces of nostalgia remained for him in different parts of their land, and the butler found this scarf. He said his mother wore it often when she was young, and he also vaguely remembers seeing the scarf around her neck. Without taking her eyes off Richard, Jasmine said that this was a very valuable thing, and she would treasure it like the apple of her eye. The guy added that as soon as he saw it, he remembered her, and just thought that this thing would suit her. Not now, he realized that he was not mistaken. Jasmine asked whether it would be right to give his mother's legacy to her. Richard replied that Raisha was not interested in jewelry, and because of her character, she obviously would not save this scarf. Yes, and he wants to give it to her, because she is a valuable person for him, and it is worthy to wear his mother's scarf. His low and quiet voice, and this warm gaze, the incredibly beautiful sky that was cut above their heads. It was all a wonderful memory that will remain in her heart and memory forever. Marie's voice pulled her out of her thoughts, after which she told her to pack it, But leave it, because the scarf does not belong to her. She devoted 7 years of her life to love him, and now she understands that they live in completely different worlds. Jasmine mentally said goodbye to Richard, deciding to leave all her feelings in this residence when she left it. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, Richard stood alone in the same place where he had talked with Jasmine, and he tried to understand from what moment everything went wrong. Endless interrogations, rage, neglect, regret. Because of remorse, he did not even notice how time flew by. Because he did not believe in the reality of what was happening. He ruined everything with his own hands because he wasn't careful enough. And now he couldn't stand himself. But it's not too late. Maybe he should run after her and stop her. He'll grab her and say everything he thinks. The image immediately flashed to his mind when he grabbed her for the last time. Jasmine's eyes reflected anger. Covering his face with his hand, Richard told himself that he was a complete idiot. Now he was completely out of his mind. However, he firmly decided that he needed to talk to Jasmine, and this time come to a reasonable conclusion. Sometime later, he stood in front of the door of her room, decided that it was too early and she was still sleeping. He was distracted by the voice of the maid who asked what brought him here. He noticed that it was not the maid Jasmine. However, he decided to tell her that he had come to meet Lady Liavani, after which he asked if she was still sleeping. The maid responded in surprise that she had left the estate at dawn, thereby stunning Richard. The woman added that she left as soon as she began to blossom, and they were all also surprised by her decision. It seems that she said that she was returning to the capital, but the guy no longer listened to her, running towards the gate. He remembered Jasmine's words when she said that she would disappear, and he had better maintain his dignity. Accelerating his run, the guy decided that that's why she left so quickly, and talked about exactly that. But was that really the end? Running out the gate, Richard noticed fresh carriage tracks, which meant that Jasmine had recently left the residence. A couple of hours later, heavy rain began to fall over the residence, which in a short time flooded the entire area. At this time, the crown princess, loudly dissatisfied, asked Richard what he was thinking about doing this. Looking at the guy who was soaked to the skin, she shouted that because of the rain the bridge was almost flooded. He wanted to cross it. Richard himself asked himself how far Jasmine managed to get, on a diet, that she was able to safely get to the capital. It started raining after she crossed the bridge, so she was probably already at home in the capital by now. The guy didn't know if it was good that he couldn't meet her because of the rain, but the main thing was that she was safe. Perhaps the heavens themselves wanted to separate them. At that very moment, Reina continued to be angry with her brother. Throwing a pile of papers at him, she loudly shouted that she was talking to him, asking what he was thinking about, asking if lightning struck him on the way. The princess demanded to tell her what happened between them. She thought it was strange that Jasmine had suddenly left. Richard said she wanted to end it all. Folding the papers, the guy explained that she accidentally overheard their conversation yesterday, which shocked Reina. The girl began to ask herself how they could have been so unlucky, and why she also became involved in this. And Richard's eyes, which lit up for the first time after meeting Jasmine, went out again, as if they had never changed at all. She then asked if he was okay, because he liked her so much, and now she made a similar statement. She was afraid that he would go crazy and kidnap her. He would do that, but he doesn't want to be hated even more. Reina apologized, because everything happened because of her words, and then offered to call her back and explain everything to her. Richard refused, that her faith in him had sunk to the very bottom. She would think that it was he who asked to return her. The princess asked what he had done, and she ran away at dawn, probably finding out how crazy he was. Hearing the agreement, the girl was shocked and thought that he was really crazy, thinking about locking him up. Then she said that he would still have to wait until the rain stopped, but now he needed to cool his head. It's a reasonable thing to do, but what if while he's here, Jasmine gains confidence in her decision? He didn't know what he would do if her affection for him cooled while she was so far away from him. Reina said that if he decided to chase after her, as soon as the rain subsided, he should discard these stupid thoughts. Now she sees that he is not smart at all, and does not know how to treat women, because he had never dated well before. She advised him to first let go of the situation, because if he followed her now, they would only quarrel. The last thing she said was that they needed time, both he and she, to sort out all their thoughts. At the same time, at the academy, a male voice demanded the attention of the professor, who did not respond to his call. He loudly asked her to wake up, hoping that she had not died yet, but the girl herself was sleeping peacefully on the sofa. Waking up from sleep, she put on her glasses, asked Jonathan what happened. He was glad that she was alive. He then handed her a piece of paper, enthusiastically demanding that Raisha look at it. She looked at the piece of paper. Jonathan explained that this was news from the high society of the empire. It was about her brother, whom she was talking about. Poking the piece of paper in her face, he explained that the Duke of Aion had become involved in a scandal, and the whole capital was talking about him. Then the guy loudly asked if her brother would get married. Hearing such a question, the girl's glasses became distorted in shock. Screaming loudly, Raisha literally tore the piece of paper out of the guy's hands in order to personally study what was written there. She immediately plunged into reading, learning that it was about Richard and the daughter of the Duke of Liavani, whom she did not know. Then she said that this was the yellow press. Jonathan agreed, because recently there was news about the cancellation of the engagement. But if the Archduchy and the Duchy become related, then the shares of the trade guild will rise, and this will not be to his advantage. The girl said that he seems to be a scientist, but he believes such nonsense. The guy explained that these rumors are not completely groundless. His friend visited the crown princess's residence and saw some things with his own eyes and can confirm. Duke Aion showed gentlemanly respect to the duke's daughter in front of several aristocrats. There were many witnesses, and the fact that he did this in front of so many people meant that he was serious. Raisha could hardly believe that her brother bowed his knee in front of so many spectators, because it was not at all like him. This cannot be. He has been wayward and terribly stubborn since childhood, as long as she can remember. She did not understand why he showed such a meaningless spectacle, perhaps for some political purpose. But if this marriage were so necessary, he would not initially refuse the proposal. Something doesn't add up. Jonathan asked if she had heard from her brother, but she replied that he would have informed about it an hour before the wedding. Adding that he would figure it out himself, the girl decided to go out for a while. The guy was surprised that she wanted to go out like that. He said that fat was dripping from her, suggesting that she take a shower. Raisha replied that it was the shine of a precious stone. As she slowly walked along the corridor, she thought that she would definitely have to go to her father's wake. When suddenly the girl stops, ask yourself what day it is today and why they met right now. At the same second, the girl who worked with her turned her head in her direction. It was Lily. Approaching Raisha, she said that a sleepless night would harm her health. She asked how preparations for the wedding were going. With a sweet smile, Lily replied that she really had nothing to do, because the groom was doing all the work. Then she decided that Raisha must come to the wedding, but she did not know whether she would have time for this. Continuing to smile, the girl said that she is very similar to Richard, in that she always says what she thinks. This surprised Raisha a little, who thought about his words, trying to compare her brother's honesty and actions. She mentally told Lily that she still didn't understand. Something that could change the situation had already passed by. It was the continental year 1874, the morning of May, and an armed conflict broke out between the Empire and the Joseon power. The angry emperor sent a large army and appointed the crown princess as its commander-in-chief, and Richard Iona, Duke of Iron Blood, appointed her deputy. Due to the war, the appointment ceremony was postponed, and the crown princess and Richard, on the way to the capital, had to turn around and head to the battlefield. This is how 6 months passed at the beginning of the war, and Richard and Jasmine had not seen each other since the summer, but they did not forget about each other. Meanwhile, at Nikki's perfume shop, the girl was offering various perfumes to Jasmine, asking if she liked them. The heroine picked up another sampler, after which she inhaled the aroma, answering that it was very pleasant. However, it does not live up to the last one a little. Nikki tiredly stated that she liked it last time. She decided to explain that when you first smell a scent, it causes different reactions from different people. At first, she wanted to add fruity notes to sweeten it, but she had an idea for a different way. Jasmine decided to ask how things were going with her brother, so that she wouldn't ask, he wouldn't tell anything. Nikki replied that this is his charm, he is very reserved and calm, then asked what about her. The friend was also wondering how she was doing with the son of Marquis Peterson, because they had recently started communicating. The girl replied that everything was quite good, but Nikki wanted to know more details about their relationship. Then she said that she needed to know when to stop. Otherwise, men might harbor a grudge against her, because she had already been given a nickname, Peony, because it blooms for only 7 days and then fades, so she dates men for no more than a week. Laughing, Jasmine replied that it sounded like the title of a play, 7-Day Peony, but Nikki was not amused. The girl threw jokes aside, saying that they were very surprised by the changes that had happened to her this summer. After all, she used to be the flower of society and attracted attention. Now she is like the queen bee in high society. There were so many men who were obsessed with her and cried at night, and in the end, she rejected them. They even started fights with people she had dated before, which got her into some pretty stupid scandals. Because of her, high society has been a complete mess lately. Jasmine replied that she didn't want this at all. Then she said that before the conversation began, she warned them all that she was not entering into a serious relationship. Nikki noted with seriousness in her voice that now she was speaking just like a charismatic but bad woman. Jasmine thought that the first one didn't come up and talk to the guys. She was just with those who came up to her. But she does not believe that these types of meetings end in anything good or long-term and serious. Then, she decided that if she dated someone who could fill the void. But this turned out not to be the case. Moreover, as soon as she notices the slightest hint of physical attraction from a man, her interest immediately fades away. Jasmine didn't care about her reputation and dated just anyone, but she should take it more seriously. She then said that Nikki was right, and she felt like she had dated everyone, but now she won't. A friend asked what was wrong with the Marquise's son, to which she received the answer that she would also have to end communication with him. Nikki at first felt sorry for Lord Peterson, but Jasmine replied that she herself said to come to her senses. At the same time, the crown princess, riding a horse, declared with a smile that she was finally seeing her native palace. Richard, who was behind her, with an unchanged expression, thought that they had returned after 6 months. Reina said that because of Diosin they suffered a lot, everything ended much faster and easier. Turning around, she added that all this was thanks to Richard's incredible merits, and the entire army would be in her hands. The guy himself looked at her with an indifferent expression on his face, having no desire to answer anything. The princess noticed that he had always been silent, but lately you couldn't get a word out of him. Suddenly, Richard raised his voice, declaring that he wanted to take a break. This news surprised the princess a little. Reina thought that even if he was called Iron, he too might be exhausted both physically and mentally. The girl agreed, after which she asked if he wanted to take a vacation for a month or two, but he sharply refused. Suddenly, the guy asked not to look for him in the next year. Such news stunned the crown princess. The girl couldn't believe that he wanted to take a year off at such a difficult time, and without him, it would be difficult for them. Richard then asked if there had ever been another time. Reina couldn't find an answer to that. During the war, she asked him if he decided to die, and how he could decide on such a stupid act. Even if this is a war, with the fate of an entire nation at stake, his decision was very rash. She asked what he had to do with such a victory, and where he was in such a hurry. Reina did not understand him, and asked him to come to his senses. At that very second, the guy asked what was the point of spending a lot of time here, being safe and not risking anything. After all, wasting time pointlessly waiting was worse than death for him, which means the risk could be worth it. The princess asked what would happen if he really died. Did he think Jasmine would praise his stupid heroism? Reina guessed that he couldn't sit still, hearing that she was living well, and didn't think about him. Having decided to die because of a woman, he must think about those people for whom he must be responsible. He thought that the princess would not know that he was irritated by the news from the capital that had recently arrived. Richard replied that he did not say that he was going to die. He was going to win in return, and why should he die? Put it in your head, he declared that he would survive in spite of everyone, and they would end this war in the shortest possible time. And now, turning away from him, the princess with a dissatisfied expression declared that he could do as he wanted. Richard asked to be relieved of his position right now, continuing further without his participation. Reina no longer had the strength to argue with him, so she replied that he could go, waving her hand at him along the way. Turning around, the guy went on his way, while the girl thought that she knew who he had been missing all these 6 months. But he himself understands that he missed the golden time when it was possible to return everything back without difficulties. Sometime later, the butler, with a smile on his face, let Raisha into the house, saying that she had not been here for a very long time. She wanted to know when the owner of the house would arrive. The man replied that his return would take about a week. The girl replied that she was already tired, so she would not like to see his face so soon. The butler laughed. He then asked if this meant that she missed him. Raisha replied that he had hearing problems. Looking at the dissatisfied girl, the man assumed that she was hungry, inviting her to enter. Suddenly, a door opened behind Raisha. Turning her head, the girl wondered what that noise was. At that same second, Richard was heading in her direction, returning home ahead of schedule. Their conversation seemed as if they did not know each other. And listening to them, the butler was in complete shock. Looking at each other indifferently, the girl stated that she had also just arrived, thereby answering her brother's question. Suddenly, she remembered that Lily said hello to him. The guy was slightly surprised, but didn't show it. When he passed her, offering to rest, Raisha was surprised that he reacted more meagerly than she had expected. Looking at his back, the girl called out to him, asking if he was getting married. Richard turned around sharply with his eyebrows furrowed. When asked what kind of nonsense this was, the girl replied that she just heard that he was going to marry Liavani's daughter. But when she didn't hear an answer, she decided that these were just rumors. But she noticed that her brother's face had noticeably changed. Suddenly, he changed the topic, asking if she washed herself, because earlier, under the pretext of research, she had not washed at all. Now she has become a professor, but she continues to smell like he's about to find a rat in her hair. Shocked, Raisha asked what he was talking about, grabbing her nose. Richard ordered her to go wash. Then he turned around, while the girl screamed that she just decided to ask a question, and he decided to just run into her. The butler replied that everything was in order, and now he would prepare a wide variety of scents for her bath. 20 minutes later, Richard was in a hot bath, trying to relax after so many months on the road. He thought that even after returning home, he would never be able to realize that it was all over, as if nothing had happened. If you think about it this way, it is the most successful achievement to end the war in such a short time, but the feeling is not the same. Normally, he would feel proud and satisfied, but now he didn't, and he hadn't solved any of his problems. Too much time has passed. If he asks her to talk, will she agree, after all? More than 6 months have passed. This is the best he could do, and it is a phenomenal achievement, but it may not be enough. These thoughts enraged Richard, and because of this, he angrily punched the water with his fist, splashing it all over the bathroom. Having drooped, all his thoughts returned to Jasmine, and he again returned to the fact that he did not know what to do. Meanwhile, the guy asked Jasmine what kind of tea she preferred. She replied that any tea except jasmine. The son of the Marcus Peterson laughed, deciding that this was some kind of joke, but there was not a hint of a smile on the girl's face. She didn't understand why everyone reacted like that, and didn't think she was joking, because she didn't like jasmine tea. But she can't ruin the atmosphere by being offended by this. She needs to put an end to everything and talk about it. When asked what she was thinking about now, Jasmine replied that there was a very pleasant atmosphere here. The guy agreed. Peterson said he was happy when she responded positively to his confession, because his feelings were genuine. Apparently, he knew that she was called the 7-day peony, but he still proposed to meet. Will he be happy with a relationship that will last no longer than a week? Perhaps he will hope that he will extend the period. Still, the girl decided to ask why he liked her. This question perplexed the guy for a second. Slightly nervous, he replied that there was hardly a man who did not admire her, the flower of society. Lowering her head slightly, she once again heard the answer that she had heard from every previous partner. Peterson said that she was interesting, charming, well-mannered, and there was no girl more elegant. He speaks as if they have known each other for a long time, and he managed to recognize her, but she has been trying to achieve this since she was 16. To turn out to be a magnificent girl in the eyes of any person, but all this was for the sake of another man. Without looking Peterson in the eye, Jasmine thanked him for the compliment, trying not to express any emotion. The guy wanted to add something else, but the girl interrupted him, inviting him to break up in one breath. At that very second, he fell silent, and his face froze in incomprehension as he tried to digest the information. Lowering her head, Jasmine drooped, realizing that she could not get used to this stage of the relationship. The girl tried to understand why she continued to do the same thing, even when it did not bring her any joy. At first, it seemed that this way she would find happiness, believing that she was now living the same fun life as others. But this sense of duty did not last. It was fun only the first time, but everything became boring, a waste of time. And so constantly, the vicious circle continued to expand, and the hole in the middle of it only grew larger. She initially did not like this relationship. She did not want it at all, believing that all this was being done in vain. Suddenly, she shuddered when someone she did not expect to see appeared on the threshold of the cafe in which they were sitting. Richard froze in the same way, trying to realize that sitting right in front of him was the girl whose thoughts were tormenting him. Grabbing the tablecloth, Jasmine tried to calm down, because she knew that someday they would cross paths again. She decided to leave the cafe before it was too late, apologizing to Peterson and saying that it was time for her to go. Suddenly, the guy grabbed her hand, asking how she could end everything so suddenly and what he had done wrong. The girl first asked to let go of her hand, but he continued to ask what didn't suit her about him. And why did she suddenly decide to start playing hard to get? Because this does not give her the right to trample on someone else's honor. Jasmine was very surprised that he pretended to be a gentleman and now turned into such a rude man. She stated that he has no right to demand anything from her, and he cannot be rude to her over a couple of meetings. The guy shouted that there was love between them. In response to this, the girl frowned, asking him not to be mistaken. Even before it all started, he knew very well that this would not last long, because she warned him about it. She herself made this mistake by not seeing his true face, so she will turn a blind eye to this impudence. The girl invited him to drink tea and relax, and in addition to think about who he decided to be rude to. Before she could move away from him, Jasmine felt someone grab her shoulder. But suddenly, a figure flashed before her eyes. At that same second, Richard stood between the guy and the girl, blocking Peterson's path with his body. He said that even if he is still just a boy and without a title, he should not forget the hierarchy of high society. Then, he asked how he dared to resort to violence against a girl who was much higher in status than him. Approaching him, Richard declared that if this were a battlefield, he would lose his tongue before he uttered a word. Jasmine, standing behind him, was surprised by his action, not expecting that he would decide to stand up for her. She also wondered how he returned so quickly and whether he came to this particular cafe by chance. Richard ordered Peterson to disappear, adding that if he caught his eye, his head would fly off his shoulders. The girl watched as the frightened guy ran out of the establishment, while Richard held her hand. And then the man asked if she was okay without looking him in the eyes. Jasmine answered in the affirmative, thanking him. Snatching her hand from his grip, she once again expressed her gratitude to him, adding that it was time for her to go. Before she could leave him, the girl heard him call, after which he asked if he could accompany her. With a straight face, the guy said that he didn't want to let her go alone. Otherwise, he would be very worried. Turning around, Jasmine sighed, after which she tried to dissuade him from this idea, that it was better not to do this. Turning her head, she noticed 3 smiling men. The eyes of those aristocrats were simply riveted on them. She hoped that what happened here would not reach her father's ears. Then she said that they were waiting for him, and she would go. Richard answered in the negative, explaining that he was going to leave anyway, to which he received a questioning look. After that, he approached his acquaintances, quickly exchanging several short phrases with them. Everyone answered unanimously that they were having fun here even without him, so he could go and see that girl off. Jasmine politely bowed to them, thinking that it was already inconvenient to continue to stand her ground and refuse the guy in front of everyone. A few minutes later, they were riding in a carriage, sitting opposite each other, trying not to look into each other's eyes. Suddenly, the guy said that she needed to strengthen her security because she almost found herself in a very dangerous situation. Jasmine replied that he behaved rudely, but he would not have gone far. There were many eyes there, and he was not that stupid. Richard said that he forgot his place and lost control. The girl replied that she herself did not expect this. She decided to explain that she had known him for only a few days. Upon hearing this, the guy opposite visibly shuddered. Then he said that she was fearless as always. Jasmine did not answer anything, shyly looking away to the side. Looking out the window, she mentally wondered why she encountered him there, in this situation. Richard asked not to blame himself, because responsibility always lies with the person who resorted to violence. Jasmine agreed, adding that you couldn't tell from the outside that he could be so rude to girls. Noticing that the guy lowered his head, she didn't even think that her words could sound ambiguous. Fingering his fingers, the man asked how she had been all this time, because he thought about her quite often. But, unlike him, she apparently didn't even remember their common past, trying to forget it like a bad dream. Without answering, Jasmine mentally asked him to stop, telling herself that she shouldn't fall for it. After a couple of seconds, she decided to answer, "What difference does it make whether he thought about her where he was or not?" Because everything was over between them. Richard said that he would like to be as frivolous. He is jealous of how simple everything is for her. With a dissatisfied look, the girl asked if he was laughing at her, to which she received the answer that he was absolutely sincere. He cannot take a single step because he is stuck in that very night, and it does not let him go to this day. And she, it seems, had already found the freedom she wanted so much, and he was glad of this, although he himself was suffering incredibly. He just wanted to say that he missed her, but he didn't want anything from her, because he knew what the answer would be. Jasmine replied that he was already late. Everything has its deadline, and they missed their time and chance to fix everything. The girl did not know what the old her would have done, but since then she has changed a lot. But it is not clear in what direction. In 6 months, she has learned not to get attached to people and no longer wants to foolishly risk everything for a person. He had not been in the capital for a long time, and because of this, he became emotional. But everything will be okay because time heals. The guy was silent for several seconds, after which he decided to ask if she really thought so, but received no answer. He then stated that she didn't seem to particularly like the men she dated. Jasmine frowned. She rudely said that such things no longer concerned him, and then asked him not to change the subject. Richard replied that he constantly forgets his place, because he is just a bloodthirsty beast that needs one thing. Crossing her arms over her chest, the girl turned away dissatisfied, deciding that it was better not to be provoked. She looks out the window again. He wanted to break this damn glass, mentally asking Jasmine to look only at him. His hands shook, and he asked to look at him, because today they met for the first time in 6 months. Blushing slightly, he decided to ask if she really had never missed him, even for a second. Jasmine mentally asked not to speak to her in such a voice, otherwise it would look like he was pressing for pity. She said that he was supposed to return in 5 days. Richard replied that he missed her, so he was in a hurry. The girl asked him to stop saying such words, then asked why he, as soon as he returned, headed to the cafe. The guy replied that he was dragged along by comrades whom he had not seen for a long time, and there he accidentally met her. Suddenly, he asked that maybe it was fate that changed its mind and wanted to bring them together again. Jasmine answered without hesitation that it was an accident, noticing that he was openly staring at her all the way. She had a feeling that the whole carriage was filled with Richard's passion, which made it even harder for her to breathe. Suddenly, the carriage ran into a pit, which caused it to shake violently inside, and the guy flew straight at the girl. Returning to his place, he said that the road was terrible, but did not receive an answer from the shy girl. Trying not to look at the guy, she thought that she urgently needed to calm down. Otherwise, everything might not go according to plan. When suddenly, the carriage shook for the second time, because of which Jasmine found herself pressed against Richard in a second. Richard, in a calm voice, asked to stand like that for a little longer, explaining that the carriage might shake again. This familiar, pleasant smell and warmth. His hands gently touch her back, and she directly feels their heat. Suddenly she shuddered, thinking that if he continued to give up, he would cross the line. The guy himself could not control himself, and did not know how to control himself when she was right in front of his eyes. He specifically asked the coachman to drive slower. If this continued, he would want to take her to a secluded place. At first, Richard wanted to let her go, but his hands shook again, after which he hugged her and pressed her to him. Pressing his nose against her shoulder, the guy again asked the question about whether it was true that she didn't miss him for a second. The girl did not answer. Instead, she hugged him by the shoulders, hearing the question of how she could do this. He doesn't understand her, although he thought about it 1,000 times, but could not answer whether she felt the same as him. When the sun began to set over the horizon, Richard went out into the dining room, where Naiza and Raisha were waiting and greeted him. The sister said that he came just in time, because they had just started dinner, and he could join. While pouring wine, the guy said that he was not going to come for dinner. Then he heard the question why he was irritated. Raisha noticed that her brother began to drink while standing, suggesting that he sit down at the table, take his time, and not drink in one gulp. When he sat down, Niza asked what the problem was, because she had come to congratulate him on the end of the war. Resting her head on her hand, the younger sister said that she still thought that the problem was with the girl. This assumption stunned the eldest, whose eyes immediately lit up, and she wanted to know the details. Turning to Richard, she began to ask if someone had appeared, and he asked in response why she was so happy. After a while, Neza said that she did not know that he was in such a relationship with the Archduke's daughter, and that everything was so serious. Raisha did not expect that there was a girl who could tolerate her brother's character, because she thought that their family would come to an end. Richard replied with a dissatisfied look that instead of speaking sarcastically, it would be better if she gave some advice. The girl replied that he is the best strategist of the empire, which means he must start thinking systematically. She suggested considering it a fortress that must be conquered, even though it would be difficult and pressure would not work. Niza agreed, adding that in this situation, everything should be resolved through conversation and try to improve relations. Richard thought about it, because it sounded reasonable to find out the reason and talk, but he was not sure whether Jasmine would agree. There are a lot of reasons. Everything happened because of the mistrust between them and because of his hasty and arrogant actions. He thought that she wanted the same thing as him. She probably thought that he was trying to manipulate her. And after she heard that conversation with the princess, does he have the right to ask her to start all over again? Naiza said he didn't do anything offensive or cheat on her. They just had a misunderstanding. And he shouldn't have acted so rashly and pushed on her. But now it's too late to regret anything. He is late and does not know that everything is useless, but he wants to return to that ballroom evening where he first met her, recognize her at first sight, just like she did then, and begin a healthy relationship with trepidation in your heart. First date, first night, slowly accumulate pleasant memories, and then propose. Perhaps she would have shed a tear and joyfully agreed. But now, all this was only in his pipe dreams. He was so stupid that he didn't see the real her, and wasn't even interested in her when she was shining brightest. And what is this crazy feeling that Richard can't get rid of? He can't muster up the courage to approach. This feeling makes him angry, hurts, and pushes him to the limit. Because of it, his hands begin to tremble. If madness and incredible affection can be called love, then apparently Richard loves Jasmine. Leaning back in his chair, only now was the guy able to figure out his true feelings for her. Sitting in front of his sisters, who were sleeping on the table, Richard mentally stated that he missed Jasmine very much. Meanwhile, Jasmine, being in her chambers, hit the teddy bear, loudly swearing at Richard's action. Then she should have asked him to keep his distance and pull away, but she didn't dare tell him that. She then repeated his question about whether she missed him, but it was impossible to answer him to his face. Of course, the girl missed her, because how could she not miss him when he had been in her head all these 6 months? But if, because of the remaining feelings of attachment, they start all over again, they will face the same problems. He has been like this since birth. So how can she change him? And she doesn't believe that people change. She will constantly doubt whether he understands her, whether he respects her feelings, and she will not stop worrying. Suddenly, Jasmine decided that she had done everything she could. She would no longer step on the same rake. In any case, she broke up with him a long time ago. She needs to discard all thoughts and enjoy life. The next day, her friends arrived to visit her, to whom she had sent invitation letters the day before. In addition to Nikki and Richian, Marian also came to see her, whom they had not seen for a long time because she was busy. Jasmine noticed that marriage deprives you of the opportunity to meet with friends more often, locking yourself within 4 walls. Richian replied that no one here was as busy as her, and Marian heard rumors about Jasmine. The girl asked her to stop, loudly declaring that from today, she would end this once and for all. Nikki praised her, adding that they were very worried because she might get caught by some terrible person. Richie supported her friend, asking why force herself if she didn't like it all. Marian said that in this way she accumulates experience, and when she gets married, there will no longer be an opportunity to have fun. Richian noted that she and her hubby lead a great life, so she has nothing to worry about. In fact, Marion was the luckiest among them, because they still act as if they had recently met. Richian asked her to stop coming to her house when she was arguing with her husband, suggesting that she come to Jasmine. Lowering her head, the red-haired girl laughed weakly, after which the girls clinked glasses, deciding to drink to themselves. After a while, Jasmine angrily threw down her cards, loudly declaring that she had lost again and was tired of it. Nikki said that she was probably the only aristocrat whose skills weren't improving at all. Suddenly, the girl remembered the day when, next to Richard, she was able to win against the princess for the first time in her life. Then he advised her which card was better to discard and which to keep, and in addition supported her in every possible way. Nikki asked Richian that she bought men's perfume from her, and then asked who she was going to give it to. She replied that she had someone, but she had only met him a couple of times, and they were not dating yet. He is very handsome, smart, and interesting, as well as skillful. She said the last word with a clear hint. However, there was one nuance, which was that he wants to become a priest. This stunned the girls. Nikki immediately noticed a contradiction, because what kind of priest is he, if he is skilled? It sounded like nonsense. Richian distantly replied that this had been his dream since childhood, so there was nothing she could do about it. Jasmine thought that now everyone is sharing about their personal things, but if she talks about Richard, will they be angry? As soon as she was about to tell about the meeting that happened during the day, she noticed that Marion was quietly crying. When they calmed down their friend, she, wiping her tears and sobbing, said that it seemed to her that her husband was cheating on her. Marion and her husband are known throughout the empire as lovebirds, and they rarely quarrel. In addition, her husband is Sawyer Atlanti, from a family of judges known for their steadfastness. Nikki did not believe that this icy man, who was head over heels in love only with his wife, could do such a thing. Richian added that he gives the impression of a monogamous swan who has only one mate for his entire life. Marion explained that this started 2 months ago. At some point, he began to come late without explaining himself. And when she asked, he began to make excuses, saying that he suddenly had a job, and this was an obvious lie. He is not particularly talkative, but now he has withdrawn even more and has become very sensitive and irritable. After several quarrels, they even stopped sleeping together. Now he doesn't even hold her hand or look into her eyes. He had a lot of secrets, and when she asked his colleagues, they said that he had no job. He began to spend more time in the library at night, following him. It turned out that he was writing letters to someone. Suddenly bursting in, she began asking questions, and he hastily burned the letter and said that it was an order with tactics. Then she found one strange medicine on him, and, having stolen one tablet, she immediately took it to the pharmacist. In the end, they explained to her that men who often cheat take this. All the girls were shocked. Jasmine thought that everything pointed to cheating, and then asked if she asked him directly about it. Putting her glass on the table, Marion replied that once she had time to ask if he had another woman, and he reacted so violently to her question, denying everything, and even began to get angry, saying how could she suspect him. She decided that she would not return home, because she didn't care, since she had quarreled with him today. Richian said that the last time she spent the night at her house for several days, he only sent her one letter. When asked what he wrote, Richie replied that he probably asked to return, but it is not known whether he apologized. Marion said that he was foaming at the mouth to prove that everything was wrong, that he was not guilty of anything, and she was complicating everything. Jasmine didn't believe it, because she couldn't allow such a thought about Sawyer, as her friend suggested that he was already bored. Although her love is already 8 years old, so why is she still in this state? And she never gets bored of this love. Marion said that she regrets that when they were dating, they broke up and got back together more than 20 times. But it all ended like this. Still, you shouldn't start dating again with the person you once broke up with. Nikki asked why they fought so often, and if it was the same reason. And they answered that the quarrels were about all sorts of nonsense, jealousy. I didn't understand the hints, but today, apparently, it was a matter of pride. Perhaps even now they are both so proud that they do not give in to each other, and now she demands an apology from him. And he, on the contrary, is waiting for an apology from her. It looked like childishness, but nothing has changed since those times. It would be better if he told some plausible lie, and she would pretend to take his word for it. Jasmine thought that Richard was trying to make things right, but she was busy licking her wounds. If she had endured her anger and listened to him, then everything could have happened completely differently. She could trust and try to understand each other, not put herself above, and not try to hurt his feelings. Jasmine suggested that the problem is trust, because Marion wants him to convince her so that she can trust him. All this happened out of fear. She was afraid that he would hurt her feelings, because then her mental wound would be deeper. Jasmine then wondered why the past her and the past he were so insecure and inexperienced. The girl said she was just voicing an opinion, but Marion smiled, declaring that she was suddenly cool. Nikki added that Jasmine has grown so much, and only yesterday she was worried whether she would be able to date anyone. But now she can die with peace of mind. But Jasmine suspiciously asked if it was sarcasm. Richian decided to return to the conversation, asking Marion what exactly she wanted to get from him now. She replied that he was to blame for giving her a reason to suspect him, because of which she felt betrayed. Then she added that she understood what they were talking about, decide that she should still talk to him frankly. Jasmine told her that no matter what choice she made, they would always support her and would always be on her side. At this moment, these words began a lot for the girl who had been carrying this burden within herself for a long time. The next day, Jasmine walked around the city, thinking that the autumn sun was very warm, and she had not walked for a long time. Yesterday, we didn't have a very good conversation with the girls, thanks to which she looked at herself from a different perspective. Although, of course, it was very difficult to console Marion in the morning and send her home, but she managed to do it. Suddenly, she noticed the bakery. The smell of fresh baked goods immediately hit her nose, and it looked delicious. Going inside, she thought that she could ask the maid. Well, since she was here anyway, she would grab it on the way. Various sweets also caught her eye. With sparkling eyes, the girl wanted to serve it all along with tea. The salesman good-naturedly advised her to try the cream bun that was pictured on the sign of their bakery. Stingy, Jasmine thought that you are their pastry chefs with excellent skills. But this bakery is also quite tasty. It seemed to her that she had bought a lot, but would share it with others, when suddenly she bumped into some person. One bun flew out of the bag, but the guy immediately grabbed it, and the girl hurried to thank him. This man turned out to be Richard, who greeted her with a smile, and then asked why she had bought so much bread. Turning her head away, Jasmine replied that it happened that way, and she herself tried to understand how they could cross paths like that. As a friend, the guy extended his hand, after which he wiped her lip with his thumb, thereby stunning her. He said that it was on her lip. The girl decided that she got dirty when she bit off the bun. She was ashamed. Then she invited him to try it. Because this is their main treat, he was surprised at such generosity. While he was breaking the sweetness, Jasmine mentally asked him to stop smiling like that, because she was annoyed by his beauty. At that very second, the guy handed her half, but she refused, Richard insisted, because she really liked the bun. The girl had to agree, after which she, shyly, took a piece after hearing Richard praise the pastries. Suddenly, the guy pulled the girl close to him and said that there were a lot of people here, suggesting that they go somewhere else. As they walked down the street, Jasmine asked how he ended up here. He replied that he had business nearby. He noticed how people crowded around the shop, and she, like a squirrel with nuts in her cheeks, was heading towards the exit. It's surprising that it was an accident again, because the last time they also met by chance. Richard added that this gave him a taste of a delicious bun, and he considers himself very lucky. He didn't think she liked baked goods. Jasmine said she just smelled the baked goods. Then she offered to take a couple of pieces for herself. Anyway, she wouldn't be able to eat it all alone, planning to share. Stretching out his hand, the guy offered to eat together, since he had not had lunch yet and would not mind sharing the meal. They sat down on a nearby bench, after which the girl asked if he was busy. He answered in the negative. Jasmine wondered if she asked him why he had so much free time. Wouldn't it be personal? At that very second, Richard himself asked if she would ask why he was not busy. The girl was surprised by such a question. Jasmine decided to ask why and why he was laughing. The guy replied that it seemed that she was not interested. He thought that, given her curious nature and residual feelings, she would definitely ask about it. Why answered that he thought that if he said that he was not busy, then she would consider it strange. Other people did that. Jasmine said that apparently he cared about the opinions of others. He laughed, then asked if it was too loud. The girl replied that she thought he was quite smiling. Richard replied that he always smiled next to her. Although now he did not know if she remembered this, when suddenly the girl squeezed the dress, asking him not to smile. The guy asked in surprise if she wanted to see him smile again, to which he was asked what was funny about that. He said he smiled and laughed whenever he wanted, which was cruel, but that was all he could do now. Without looking in his direction, Jasmine decided to remain silent, trying not to react to his provocations. Richard asked if it was hard or more for her to be around him. If so, he would try his best. Having broken the cookie in half and handed half to the guy, the girl replied that it was not hard, although it was uncomfortable. Taking a bite of the cookie right from her hand, Richard asked if it turns out that he still thinks about it. The girl assumed that he was just wishful thinking and asked if he wanted to tell her something. Without hesitation or hiding, the guy replied that he wanted to see her as often and as closely as possible. And he would like this every day, or at least once every 3 or 4 days, even if they keep their distance. Blushing, he added that it hurt him so much that he couldn't see her, and now he was incredibly happy. Biting her lip, Jasmine asked why he wanted to see her, and why it hurt him that he couldn't see her. And in the end, she hates herself for desperately wanting to hear that he was in great pain because of her. She already knew that now he was ready to answer, and she had once wanted to hear these words, but now she was scared. As soon as he said her name, the girl immediately interrupted him and loudly declared that she did not want to hear it. The guy fell silent, looking dumbfounded at Jasmine, who could barely restrain herself from crying in front of him. Jasmine immediately covered her mouth with her hand, thinking that she was so overwhelmed with emotions that she screamed. Apparently, she still cannot let go of her feelings for Richard, although she thought that everything was over a long time ago. Then the girl tried to apologize, but the guy immediately said that everything was fine, simultaneously putting her on the shoulder. Richard said that he acted too selfishly, so she should not apologize for his arrogant request. He answers with such warmth, which only hurts her more, and she acted too rashly. The guy was shocked when he noticed that tears were running down Jasmine's face, and she could barely control herself. He immediately began to wipe away his tears, asking her not to cry, simultaneously apologizing for saying too much. The girl, in turn, began to apologize herself, but Richard interrupted her, saying that he was fine. He then hugged her tightly and held her close, thinking that her tears were literally breaking his heart to pieces. When the guy took her chin, the girl shuddered, looking in surprise at his smile. He asked what he should do and suggested not to appear in front of her again, but the girl just silently shook her head. When he visited her again, Richard, blushing, thought that now she looked very sweet and charming. Then the guy asked if she didn't like the fact that he was laughing, after which he suggested not to laugh anymore. Stating that she was cute, Jasmine asked if she was in her million-dollar mind, and how could she be so joyful now? Having asked her not to be angry, she said that he was crazy. Richard agreed with a smile that he was out of his mind. Laying her head on his shoulder, she added that he was very strange. He agreed, enjoying her closeness. After some time, Jasmine began to awaken from sleep. Richard was sitting next to her, covering the girl with his jacket. She woke up when she heard a melody. The next second, the guy asked if she had a good dream. Embarrassed, she asked herself when she had just fallen asleep. She was ashamed, because she could not relax. Then she asked what kind of melody he was humming just now. He replied that it was a lullaby that his mother sang. The girl said that as a child she was restless, and because of the lullaby, she would wake up and make a fuss. He was lucky that they had not met earlier, because even the home teacher, known for his tough character, was afraid of her. Come to think of it, she didn't even study back then, didn't find the classes interesting, so she failed the entrance exam. Richard was surprised when he heard the question that a genius could not understand the feelings of a laggard. He only laughed. He explained that everyone has their own talents, and science is not for her, because she listened to her heart, and he obeyed orders. Jasmine asked him not to flatter. She was a bad student, but it would be nice if she got an education. Since all her friends graduated from the academy, she sometimes felt isolated and different from everyone. Richard said that she would definitely have managed it. Perhaps they would have become friends and gone to the festival someday. The girl noticed how detailed he described everything, to which she heard the question whether she felt better. which is why she was surprised. He explained that now, being next to him, she behaves more relaxed and at ease, as if she had gotten used to it. Jasmine replied that some of the awkwardness had disappeared, while he had been comfortable from the very beginning. The girl asked if he could stop talking like that, because it was a little embarrassing. The guy barely noticeably shuddered. He then asked if she was comfortable with him. She replied that she knew he was still interested in her. Only lovers speak of such words, which does not quite harmoniously fit into their current relationship. Richard wilted slightly, answering that he understood everything, and apparently he just got into the habit of saying everything honestly. However, now he cannot allow her to avoid him because he burdens her with his presence. The guy decided to clarify that his straightforwardness did not burden her. Jasmine replied that everything was fine. The man who was once cold towards her now behaves like a boy in love, even now observing her reaction. Apparently, this is the kind of Richard she fell in love with. He is more beautiful than the man for whom she suffered for 7 long years. But why does fate bring them together again? She ran after him blindly for a long time, but she doesn't know if she regrets it. Even these actions were the basis of her inner growth, and she discovered new sides of herself that she was not aware of. She was a typical representative of an aristocratic family who did not stand out among others. Although all of them, unlike her, at least had a dream. But all this was until the moment she met Richard. He was her dream. It was he who became the very dream that she acquired for the first time in her entire life. Jasmine said that, thanks to him, she felt a lot for the first time and really learned a lot. Richard didn't answer, thinking that these words made his heart flutter. Why did they make him so anxious? Imperceptibly, clenching his hands into a fist, it seemed to him that there was not a drop of feeling of regret left in the girl. He then said that he was glad if he could help her in some way, but then he noticed how the girl was looking at someone. Finger pointing at the man, Jasmine asked if that man was Lord Sawyer, the husband of one of her best friends. Richard confirmed this, and also noticed that there was a tavern in that direction. They wondered where he was going. Jumping up, Jasmine thought it was very strange. Feeling as if she had to follow him, Richard was surprised by her behavior, and she suggested that they go, because now they urgently need to follow him. As the sun set below the horizon, Jasmine and Richard put on their hooded cloaks and made their way through the dark alley. Walking ahead, the guy asked to tell him why she decided to follow Count Atlanti to such a place. Jasmine first asked him to swear on his honor that he would not tell anyone about this. He agreed. For the next few minutes, the girl retold the story that her friend suspected her husband. When asked if that was why she decided to follow up to check everything, the girl replied that it would be nice to know. Richard said that she should have entrusted this matter to servants or professionals, because it was impossible for them to find out about it. However, the guy was ready to do anything for Jasmine, but he was confident in the Count's honesty in such things. The girl said that every man has his own views on this matter. Then she began to ask questions for the Lord. They serve in the same unit, and between them, there was only a business conversation, and even then they exchanged a few words. He could not say anything and knows him only as an employee, but most likely he is unlikely to go out on the side. Suddenly, Jasmine crashed into the back of the guy, who stopped abruptly, watching Sawyer from around the corner. It seemed to him that he was waiting for someone, as a man with ashen hair looked around, looking for someone. Richard suggested hiding and waiting here to avoid being exposed, and this place was perfect for them. Jasmine obeyed, after which she pressed herself against the guy's body, thereby driving him into blush and embarrassment. Suddenly, Richard suggested that they just return home because of the bills, which could be very dangerous for her here. There are few people in this alley, and if suddenly the Count is involved in some illegal affairs, then everything will become more serious. Looking at the excited and blushing guy, she didn't even understand what she should be afraid of if the Duke was next to her. She felt something pressing against her thigh below. Richard apologized, saying that she was standing very close. Getting nervous, the girl suggested moving a little, which is why the guy flinched, asking not to move at all. Hearing some strange sounds around the corner, Sawyer turned around in fear and then began to peer there. Why did he loudly ask who was there? Which is why Jasmine and Richard immediately froze, trying not to move or breathe. When the guy pressed her to him, she thought that her heart was going to jump out of her chest, although this is not the situation now. At that same second, a cat jumped out from around the corner, which managed to scare the Lord. But in doing so, she calmed him down. Suddenly, a door opened behind him, and a man called him over, asking if he had come for the goods. At the same time, Jasmine slowly removed her palms from her mouth, exhaling in relief, glad that they were not caught. Suddenly, Richard grabbed her and pressed her to him. She realized in horror that he was still in this state. Pressing her foot against his dignity, she decided that this would not count as making love. The guy trembled, asking her to stop doing this, but the girl herself decided to help him calm down. The greatest knight of the empire is almost ready to break down just because of the movement of her hand. It's strange, but pleasant. And now Richard could barely control himself, and his legs gave way from the efforts of the girl he was clinging to. Finding the strength within himself, he asked Jasmine to stop, because he liked it so much that he couldn't stand it anymore. After some time, Sawyer left the building, while they told him to come in if he needed anything. At the same second, Jasmine and Richard, who were very close to each other, were catching their breath. The embarrassed girl said that it was time for them to return too, since it was too late and the Lord had already left. The guy agreed, adding that he would find out if the Count was involved in some illegal affairs. She thanked him. A couple of days later, Marion arrived at the Liavani estate for a visit, and she apologized for coming without warning. Jasmine replied with a smile that she was always glad to see her, and was ready to receive her dear friend at any moment. But suddenly, the smile disappeared from the girl's face when she said that she had something to say about her husband. She reminded Jasmine about the medicine he talked about earlier, and still got answers from him. It was erectile dysfunction medicine. Jasmine was shocked when she heard this, smiling ridiculously. The friend explained that it was hard for him because of the consequences of the war, and he did not want to bother her about it and hid it. She felt guilty for suspecting him of something else, even though he just didn't want to upset her. Smiling, Marie said that she had decided to generously forgive him, and they very warmly made up with him. And after the conversation, he felt better. Then she thanked Jasmine for worrying about her and showing concern. And she hopes that her friend will also be able to solve her problem with the Duke. She was surprised that she knew everything. Marion replied that the news was spreading very quickly throughout the capital, but she would always support it. After lunch that same day, in the capital's pastry shop, Richard said that he was glad that everything had worked out for them. He was not the first to start talking about it, because he already knew everything in great detail. Jasmine said that everything was resolved well. Lord Sawyer said what Marion wanted to hear. When asked what she meant, the girl replied that he apologized, admitted his guilt, and confessed his love. Why did she add that, like any woman in a similar situation, she wanted the man to apologize to her? These are very simple things that men often overlook. Richard thought about it for a second. Suddenly, the girl decided to change the subject, asking with interest when he managed to book this place. He replied that this pastry shop is very popular. It is difficult to reserve a table, and people wait in line for months. Jasmine suggested that his title had a role in this. He replied that he came with the highest-ranking lady. Then he offered her a menu, asking her to choose, asking at the same time how she would like this fruitcake or pie. He had already ordered drinks, and they would go perfectly with dessert. The girl was surprised by his attention, but agreed. She noticed that he was quite familiar with this place. One would think that he was the owner of this place. With a smile, Richard asked, what if he was the owner? And in that case, would she like him better? Jasmine was confused, not knowing how to answer this question, because she did not believe that he was really the owner. When they brought their order, the girl noticed that everything was so beautiful that she didn't even want to touch it. And the taste was simply impeccable. It was the best thing she had tasted recently, although she loves sweets very much. Richard said that he remembered her love for sweets. She assumed that he had planned everything carefully, and so he decided to open his own pastry shop. The guy agreed with a smile, which surprised Jasmine. Looking carefully at the girl's face, the guy calmly declared that he was the owner of this pastry shop. The girl loudly asked if it was a joke. Richard replied that he was glad that she liked it. She was shocked that he opened a candy store just to treat her to the sweets that she loves. He asked her not to feel burdened. It was enough for him that she would eat deliciously and be satisfied. Sighing heavily, Jasmine asked why he was doing all this, and had he always been so impulsive. Richard replied that he used to think that she knew him very well, But now it seemed completely different. In front of her, he always did what he wanted, because next to her, he could be himself, without hiding behind a mask. That's why he liked her even more. These words made Jasmine freeze and hold her breath. Taking her hand, Richard added that after parting with her, not a day passed that he did not think or remember about her. He tried to be sincere and still failed, although he was ashamed to admit that he had made a stupid mistake. However, the guy knows that this is difficult and scary for her, that he is too late, but he cannot come to terms with something. When he suddenly stated that he still wanted to start over with her, these words made Jasmine look down.